Welcome back inside the secret Gibby headquarters for the new season of Gibby's Football Podcast. I am your host, Zach McGibbon. A new season of the NFL has arrived. It's official. We've gone through the illegal tampering period into the legal tampering period, and now the official start of the season. And with the new season, new episode of the podcast coming out as well, I figured let's get a new guest co-host on. And I've known this man for quite a while. Had many passionate debates back in the day, as he, I'll let it be known, he's a Green Bay Packers fan. Many passionate debates back in the day. There is no other version of this Persian, and he's also the man that Stephen A. Smith fears to debate. This man is Mehran Mohammadi. Mehran, it's great to talk with you, buddy. How are things going with you?
Everything's going well. I'm looking forward to this discussion. I couldn't have asked for a better intro, so let's get underway.
I love it. And so a lot of that is true, by the way, including that Stephen A. Smith is afraid to debate you. So let's get the listeners to know you a little bit more. Many years ago, there was First Take Your Take, I believe was the name of the show, where a bunch of viewers were able to send in some video responses to Stephen A. Smith and I believe Max Kellerman at the time. And lo and behold, I watch an episode and I see a familiar face going after Stephen A. Smith. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so what happened was I was trying to do whatever it took to get their attention. I'd take different approaches. So the first one was just a rather like laissez-faire, just get a take out there, and they put my video there as a part of a reel. It wasn't selected or anything. So I'm like, okay, I got one foot in the door. How do I make more of an impression? So then for my next one that Stephen A. so famously denied me for was I gave out a little list of why the Patriots dynasty was coming to an end. This was coming at the post Eagles Super Bowl loss. And then I guess it gave him the opportunity because of the way I framed my argument in terms of 5 reasons why, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. He famously used the line, "This isn't a dissertation for post-grad school," or something along those lines. And those words have been etched in my mind ever since. And he, with his words, rejected my video, and then I never came across Stephen A. again.
Ladies and gentlemen, this Patriots dynasty has come to an end. And you just have to look at the factors going against them at the moment for further confirmation. Firstly, this Malcolm Butler stuff is a lot more telling than you think. Second, this little power struggle with Belichick, Brady, and Kraft exposed them to the public of all the off-field drama that we weren't aware of.
Cut it! What the hell is this? A dissertation that you're giving in grad school or something? I mean, that's not a debate. I don't know what the hell you're thinking, but you're going to come up on First Take with that? That's your argument? It sounds very weak, young man. You need a bit more practice before you're ready to come up here with this. Sorry. You're out of the mix.
Oh, he's afraid of you. He didn't want to debate that take. I mean, let's just be real here. I mean, you brought it to him and he didn't even want to go after the main points. He just totally blew you off and just brushed you aside. So that's why I tell people, look, you want to go like this man, like Stephen A. Smith himself, the man known for heated debates on television. I mean, this man I'm talking to right here, Mehran Mohammadi. I mean, he doesn't even want to debate him, but I'm willing to debate you just in case a heated topic comes up. We're not afraid of anything here on Gibby's Football Podcast. And so, yeah, I remember watching the video just being so thoroughly entertained that you got there. You got to face Stephen A. Smith. It's obviously different from what you would get from a Kellerman or a Skip Bayless, but still you got there. You took it to Stephen A. And so I will always respect you for that. And I mentioned before, you're a big Green Bay Packers fan, and the Packers are certainly a team that's been, let's say, dominating the headlines when it comes to free agency. We're going to get right into the free agency frenzy, as well as all the trades that have gone down in the NFL since the start of the season. A lot has happened. A lot of a couple of retirements. I mentioned some trades in there as well, some big signings. It's amazing how they're able, once the legal tampering period starts, all of a sudden, only an hour in, these big mega money deals, they're they're just able to get these done right away. Like just these $100 million deals an hour in, just everybody's able to agree. It's unbelievable. You got to commend the agents here, Mehran, to be able to get these big money deals done in only a matter of an hour.
They get paid the big bucks, so I guess with those big bucks comes efficiency.
Exactly. And so we'll start off things here. I've got my little sheet here just to kind of keep track of everything. We're going to go division by division when it comes to significant signings for each squad and which pickups for each squad as well. We're going to start in the AFC East, and I think it's appropriate we start in the AFC East because one of these teams as well, with the Packers getting a lot of talk in the NFL media world. Starting off with the Bills, nothing too crazy when it comes to their free agency so far. They were able to get Matt Milano on a 2-year extension. Jordan Poyer coming in on a 2-year deal. And also they solidify their special teams with Deontay Hardy, their kick returner there. Get a little bit of support, a guy I'm familiar with, Connor McGovern, offensive lineman, guard, a 3-year, $23 million contract to solidify the offensive line for the Bills. And then kind of looking over to the Dolphins, and they've made quite a few moves, including a big acquisition and a trade for Jalen Ramsey and not really having to give up too much to get him. We'll talk about that in a moment. Some other significant moves. They've re-signed pretty much their running back core and Myles Gaskin, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson. Mike White comes in, a former Jet, now coming in to be the backup for Tua Tagovailoa. Add some depth to that quarterback depth chart. Braxton Berrios coming in as well, so a couple of big moves there. The Patriots, James Robinson is a guy that it seemed like he was going to be one of the better running backs in the league, and since then traded from Jacksonville to the Jets, not really getting anything going. Now the Patriots pick him up, and maybe he's able to get his feet back underneath with the Patriots. Juju Smith-Schuster comes in. I don't know if he's the wide receiver one, but we're going to see when it comes to Juju going to the Patriots. Also, Riley Reef coming in on a sort of prove-it deal, a 1-year, $5 million deal. Jabril Peppers re-signing on a 2-year, $9 million deal. And, of course, the New York Jets, a team that's been much talked about this offseason so far. Alan Lazard, in what could be a first up of more to come, signs with the New York Jets on a 4-year, $44 million deal. And Quincy Williams, linebacker, he re-signs. Greg Zuerlein, another guy I'm familiar with, the kicker for the Jets, he re-signs. And so that's kind of a look of the AFC East right now. And there could be one significant move that could totally shake up that division if all kind of plays out the way that we think we will. And we'll just kind of go right into it right away. Aaron Rodgers looks like he's going to be on his way to the Jets. Not a matter of if, a matter of when it comes to A-Rod. And I figured, you know what, and part of the reason why you're on, Mehran, because I know for the longest time you've seen A-Rod from the start of his career all the way till now with the Packers, got a Super Bowl in there. You've seen the best of Aaron Rodgers, even the worst of Aaron Rodgers sometimes, but a lot more peaks than valleys when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. Now it looks like he's going to go to the Jets. That's the other option there. Your thoughts on just a potential deal, and do you think this will be a good landing spot for Aaron Rodgers in terms of the weapons that could be potentially around him landing with the Jets?
Well, appreciate the little introduction there and the breaking it down for me to speak on Aaron Rodgers first thing. But it's crazy. I'm going to start with this. It's crazy how this division here used to be one of the laughing stocks of the league. Now we're looking at it as arguably the best in the league. And to start with the Jets here, they've finally landed their quarterback. It's been, I don't know how long that they've been looking for this quarterback. I know they went to a couple AFC championships with Mark Sanchez, but even then there was no answer there. They had a season with Fitzpatrick, but now they've got a quarterback that they don't have to cast doubts on. They have a quarterback that's been there, done that, and they can finally get rid of that question mark and put an exclamation point on it. Aaron Rodgers at his age, coming off last season where it looked like everything was much of a roller coaster in terms of how the Packers performed. But there were still spurts in there where you saw the Aaron Rodgers of old. And if you just get, even at this age, 80% of what the Aaron Rodgers was throughout his career, that puts the Jets in a position not to be the favorite in the AFC East or the AFC, but to be in contention to not only win the division, but to be there come February. So I know that's putting a lot because this is a team that, again, they had the defense last year, and a lot of games lost were from the quarterback position. You get rid of that gap with Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure the win prediction goes up a little bit. So I don't know what you think of Aaron Rodgers at this time, but I can't help but not put an exclamation point for the Jets here.
Yeah, this is going to be big time for the New York Jets. They needed somebody at quarterback for a long, long time. When the last, and I'll say good in quotation marks, quarterback that you had was Chad Pennington in the mid-2000s. And even then, I would not even say he was good. He had his moments where he's certainly, compared to other quarterbacks that the Jets have had in years past, he's kind of shines brighter a little bit than some of the others. But really, the last great quarterback that they had is Joe Namath. I mean, you could maybe argue Boomer Esiason if you wanted to, but they needed to make a statement here. And as you mentioned, the Jets, they've got a young squad, a really good defense, and they've got some pieces there. And at the end of the day, Zach Wilson just isn't the guy for the Jets, and he may go down as one of the biggest draft busts of all time. But nonetheless, I don't know if you saw the quote that was circulating around from this past February with Zach Wilson saying, whoever the veteran quarterback is coming into training camp, I'm going to compete with him. So maybe, who knows, maybe Zach Wilson beats Aaron Rodgers in the training camp. He becomes the next coming of Steve Young, able to move around, BYU product, and able to move around and zip the ball. But yeah, I think in terms of just as a skill player, Aaron Rodgers will bring a lot to that franchise. I agree with you. I think he still has a lot in the tank to do something. And I think an Aaron Rodgers with a chip on his shoulder could be something to watch when it comes to the Jets in terms of the organization, how he views the organization, and how everything kind of went down nearing the end. You talk about the darkness retreat, and coming into the darkness retreat, 90% sure he was going to retire. Then he comes out and he feels a little cold from the Jets, kind of paraphrasing there, but feels like the Jets are saying something in public differently than how they're feeling in private. I'm interested to see how he is with a chip on his shoulder, and I think too. I mean, he'll have Garrett Wilson there as an option. We just saw Alan Lazard as well. Other thing I do want to get your opinion on is there was that report that was out there, and I know he was a little bit more bashful about the report, but whether you want to call it a wish list or a demand list or a list of players that he would like to see in the organization, there's a rumored list of guys like Alan Lazard, a Randall Cobb, OBJ, Mercedes Lewis, guys that are kind of like, other than OBJ, that Rodgers kind of familiar with in Green Bay and able to have a previous connection with. Do you make anything of that list? Do you think is that a big deal in terms of like, oh, this guy's coming in and making demands, and especially a lot of receivers on that list, and they've got a young core of receivers. Like, what are they doing? They've got the offensive rookie of the year in Garrett Wilson on their squad. Why is Rodgers getting all these receivers? What about the targets? How is Elijah Moore feeling in all of this? Like, what's going on here? But do you think that's such a big deal, or do you think it's nothing really to make of?
So what you got to go with is that until we see this contingent of Green Bay players show up, we can't really make anything of this list because it just hasn't materialized. And we see Aaron Rodgers deny the report out there. So what I would say, though, is that Aaron Rodgers over the years, especially we've seen the past few years, especially under the LaFleur system, it's taken him a little bit to get going. Even in those two MVP years, in 2020, 2021. 2021, if you remember, they lost, I think it was 33-3 against the Saints. So it took them some time to build up on that, to build the rapport with that offense, even in spite of coming off an MVP season. Matt LaFleur's first year, Aaron Rodgers, that was the year where they, in the aftermath, they drafted Jordan Love. So what is going to happen with or without these players? There's going to be some growing pains with Aaron Rodgers and this offense. And if these players do show up, I think it only helps because at least at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers has those safety nets. And to piggyback off that once more, and this is maybe the one concern the Green Bay Pack or the Jets should have, is those growing pains from the get-go. I don't know if I'm going to see Aaron Rodgers slicing and dicing from games 1, 2, 3, 4. New offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and I'm sure there's going to be some new weapons around him with Lazard and maybe some more. So I don't expect Aaron Rodgers to be MVP from day one. Expect it to be very steady, very maybe game manager the first little bit. And then maybe by midseason, I think that's where you're going to see the flourishing of Aaron Rodgers and this New York Jet relationship.
And one last quick point on the Jets. You mentioned a new offensive coordinator, still a familiar offensive coordinator for Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett. Anything really to make of? I mean, the former offensive coordinator for the Jets was Mike LaFleur, the brother of Matt. So he gets getting rid of. I think he was kind of more of a scapegoat for what happened with the Jets offensively more than anything, especially if a guy like Sean McVay is bringing him in as his own offensive coordinator, if I recall correctly, in that Rams system. But you still have a familiarity there with Nathaniel Hackett. Rodgers has definitely spoken bright when it comes to Hackett. You know, it's you mentioned in terms of, you know, taking a couple of baby steps, getting used to the new system when it comes to Hackett. Do you think maybe it could be quicker because there's already that familiarity there with between Hackett and A-Rod?
As much as I'd love to believe it, it's just that there's too many moving parts I know I'm speaking on generalities, but a new franchise, new players, there's just too many variables for Aaron Rodgers to get going. It's not the same variables that he had in Green Bay. It's not the same coaching staff. So building that familiarity, it'll be interesting to see if Aaron Rodgers goes to the OTAs and all those off-season workouts and such, because he hasn't done that in Green Bay for quite a while, which might have also fueled his slow start. So yeah, the familiarity, the comfort might allow Aaron Rodgers to be maybe more relaxed from the get-go, but I don't expect anything out of that in terms of the output. Just we'll have to wait and see. We'll see come day one, OTAs, minicamp. Is Aaron Rodgers there? Is he building rapport? And that'll be more telling, if anything.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about your Packers and how they're going to be affected in all of this in a moment. But I want to wrap up a little bit of the AFC East here. A team I want to highlight, and this is a team that I've personally just loved the moves that they've been making the last couple of years, and that's the Miami Dolphins. I think they've just been building such a solid squad. Bringing in a Mike McDaniel as a head coach, I think he's shown early in the season especially that he's able to utilize the weapons that he's got there. I think just the biggest need going into the offseason for the Dolphins was trying to shore up that defense. And they have some good players there. Christian Wilkins is a guy that comes to mind immediately on the defensive line. That's a key player. But they needed to add some other assets on the defense for Miami to be a more complete team as opposed to just an offensive-driven team. And so they go out there, they get Vic Fangio, the defensive guru, to be their new defensive coordinator, able to steal him away, I think, from the Philadelphia Eagles. So as a Cowboys fan, I appreciate that. But in terms of other pieces as well, we mentioned as well, Jalen Ramsey being acquired. Not much to get Jalen Ramsey, a third-round pick this year, and Hunter Long, who has a total of 1 catch in his career as an NFL tight end. So I imagine that is more, and I think you've mentioned it before as well, as more the Rams trying to save up as much cap as they can, not take in too much expensive money and trying to get rid of Jalen Ramsey off the books. But I think a loss for the Rams is certainly a gain for the Dolphins with a defensive core that also has Xavier Rhodes, I believe. Xavier Howard. And
there we go.
There you go. I was thinking of the Colts defensive back, but nonetheless, I think they've really been addressing defense quite a bit, and obviously they keep some of their familiar running backs in Gaskin, Mostert, and Jeff Wilson, 2 San Francisco 49er running backs in there, and then Mike White coming in to be a little bit more of an insurance policy. You have a little bit of uneasiness with Tua Tagovailoa. But the Dolphins, to me, are a team that kind of sticks out, and I've always been, despite the owner getting himself fined and trying to recruit Tom Brady, I think the moves that the Dolphins have been making the last couple of years has been really good, and they've kept themselves competitive in this AFC East division.
So yeah, I found, especially at the start of last season, up until this point, the Miami Dolphins are the X factor, not just in the AFC, but the NFL. it wasn't that long ago where there was takes being made, claims being made that the Dolphins could represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. They were undefeated. They had just beaten the Bills and the Ravens in the manner that they did. And everybody was high on them. Then obviously everything that transpired with Tua, the inconsistency of his health. And again, they only lost in Buffalo by 3 points. And that was with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. So what you said about the Dolphins, everything is true. I love what they're doing. They are bit by bit building or finishing up their roster. The defense, I'm sure Vic Fangio is going to enjoy the tools he's got at his disposal. You've got 2 corners in the caliber of Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey. You've got Bradley Chubb there. You've got Christian Wilkins there. You've got guys up front that can ball. The offense, we saw with Tua healthy, they can explode. They can get on fire. So Mike McDaniel, I've never seen, again, health is one thing, but on paper, such a quick turnaround for a franchise that Mike McDaniel's done so far. What is obviously the key is Tua's health. Mike McDaniel loves to harp that Tua is the perfect quarterback for a system. Tua this, Tua that. So until Tua plays for a long set of games, I can't really take Mike McDaniel's words to the bank, to the vault. So, but I guess to recap, if this team is healthy with the offense and then defense, you mentioned it, Vic Fangio, this team has the makings to get out of the AFC and represent. I know I said that about the Jets, but that's how deep this division is. You got 3 Super Bowl contenders, once healthy, that can go all the way. So yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I just love this Dolphins squad. I've been preaching the Dolphins for so long, and I hope. It definitely looks like to me, you mentioned the turnaround, and you're seeing a couple of more NFL franchises being able to turn things around within a year. There's no longer, some teams still do it, but you hear about the 4 or 5 year rebuilds that these teams do to try and find the right guys. And now you're starting to see it a lot quicker with the Dolphins, as you mentioned. I think the Rams were able to do that a couple of years ago with McVay, able to turn it around so quickly as well. That's just kind of the new hot thing. There's always that one hot thing that takes over the NFL when it comes to young offensive coordinators that are in their early 30s. They're going to revolutionize the offense when they come in. Or many years ago, kind of sticking with the Dolphins, the Wildcat. The Wildcat is going to change the way the offense is played in the NFL. And obviously that didn't last as long, but there's always that kind of hot trend. And I think right now you're seeing a trend of teams being willing to go all in after a rough season and try to be able to turn around within a year. And just kind of quickly looking at the other teams here, the Patriots and the Bills, nothing too much for me to say on either squad. I think in the case of the Patriots, I know they signed Juju Smith-Schuster, but they're a team that for some reason, in my mind, I don't know why, but they get talked about in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes, if there are sweepstakes for DeAndre Hopkins. I think the factor that Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator for the Patriots totally nullifies that, but maybe bygones are bygones and they're able to move past it. But certainly Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi or whoever ends up being QB1 in New England, obviously it's going to be Mac Jones, but whoever is the QB1 could certainly use a top-notch wide receiver 1, especially with Jacoby Myers being out of that system.
So yeah, the Patriots are the one of the teams that I just can't wrap my head around, not in terms of what they're doing, but just in terms of what their ceiling is. And I feel like the Bills are the complete opposite of that. See, with the Patriots, I see their floor is much higher than what they've got for a roster, whereas the Bills, their floor can be so low, but yet their ceiling is so high. You really don't know what you get out of the Bills. From the Patriots, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a team that competes every week. Some weeks they're going to compete against the best teams, and other times they might get walloped. So I don't anticipate the Patriots making much noise, at least not this year. I think this is the time where we figure out whether Mac Jones is the quarterback to lead them moving forward. I know there's been a lot of reports about, attitude and such, and maybe does he have the discipline to be a franchise quarterback? And as it goes for the Bills, listen, there was times last year where I thought, especially early on, maybe after week 2, I think that's when they were still undefeated, that they could run the table. That's how crazy high their ceiling was in terms of their performances. But then you see some performances where you're just scratching your head, like, that's not the team I saw in week 1 against the Rams. It's not the team where I see exploding on the field all the time. And you see that in some losses, the loss they had in Miami, the loss they had at the Jets, even in their loss in the playoffs, you always feel like you're wanting more from the Bills. And you really know, and you know there's no excuse because they're in a win now mode. They've got an elite quarterback. They've got a win now roster with franchise guys in both the offense and defense. So anything less than a Super Bowl appearance is a failure for this team moving forward. And the fact that they lost at home to the Bengals last season in a game where the locale, again, favored them based on what transpired during the season, and yet they still couldn't put it together. And that's the concern I have for the Bills. If it wasn't last year with the Chiefs, retooling their roster, if it wasn't last year where they had the home playoff game against a team like the Bengals and get walloped, are we ever going to see this team get over the hump? And that's the concerning part.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% on a lot of those points. The Bills especially, and I think back to the Vikings game too, and it's just like they seem to be in it, then they just make these really dumb mistakes. I think to Josh Allen fumbling the ball in his own end zone and causing that safety, and it's just there's such a, as you mentioned, they could be, when they're hot, they are super hot. They are probably the best team in the NFL. But when they are cold and they don't get anything going and Josh Allen stalls, it's rough. And so that's going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on. And so that's a look at the AFC East. Let's go to the AFC North, and another team that's kind of been in the headlines recently with their quarterback situation, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. A lot of talk about Lamar Jackson. Does he need an agent? Does he not need an agent? Is he asking for too much money? Is he asking for too much guaranteed money? Who does Lamar Jackson think he is? Can he even be a starter for other teams? So many takes about Lamar Jackson, but we'll get into it here. Not much otherwise for the Ravens in terms of their deals, unless you consider re-signing Justice Hill on a 1-year, $2.255 million deal, a huge acquisition, then be my guest. But in terms of the Bengals, again, nothing too crazy so far, but they do go after the offensive line. They take Orlando Brown from the Chiefs, and so that's going to really help their offensive line. That's kind of the big signing for them. Cleveland Browns, they shore up a bit of their defense. They get a good edge guy in Ogbo Okoronkwo, and also Tristan Hill is expected to sign with the Browns. He's a guy that's a former Cowboy. You're going to notice a trend here, by the way. I recognize some former Cowboys. I'll point it out. And Juan Thornhill, they agreed to a 3-year, $21 million contract, $14 million guaranteed. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, another team that's kind of been silent. Really the only major one in terms of name value, star power, is Patrick Peterson, the all-pro defensive back, signing a 2-year, $14 million deal to kind of shore up the defense for the Steelers and get their defensive backs in order. But nothing too crazy in the AFC North. That kind of seems pretty standard for the AFC North, pretty low-key, kind of nothing too loud or rambunctious when it comes to the AFC North. But really, right now, all eyes are kind of on this Lamar Jackson situation. A bunch of these teams coming out and saying they're not going to go after Lamar Jackson, even though he's on the non-exclusive franchise tag. Is he worth the 2 first-round picks? So I want to hear from you, Mehran. Is Lamar Jackson worth it? Is he worth the money that he's being asked for? Is he worth giving up 2 first-round picks for?
It's not often you see a quarterback, an MVP quarterback. I know he's not on the open market technically because the Ravens can match anything, but it's so rare. And the fact that there's not any noise, you're seeing reports that teams are actually withdrawing interest. Maybe it's just me. I don't understand the inner workings behind all this, behind what's being reported and such. Are the Ravens trying to get less value on Lamar so they don't have to sign him to as much? Is something going on where Lamar is the vulnerable one in this case? From talent alone, when he's on the field, there hasn't been many quarterbacks better than him. If you, at least not with 2 hands, maybe on one hand you can think of it, but not many times you can see a quarterback with this skill set. You'll say what you want about his arm, but he won an MVP, and not solely rushing the football doesn't win you MVP. So he does something there. He's shown that he can perform in the playoffs. He's won one playoff game. He's 1-3 in the playoffs now. So he's still got some work to do, but he's proven that he can win in the NFL. He's proven that he can win games throwing the football. And whether that takes you to a Super Bowl or not, that's one thing. But if you give him an opportunity to grow as a passer still, and maybe not be in a Greg Roman system, maybe he'd surprise you throwing the football. Until then, we'll never know. But you can't not get excited with that skill set of a guy that quick, that fast, and that is at the very least, worst case, a really good thrower of the football. And the fact that no team is a team like, I don't know, the Colts, at least not gauging, maybe they're doing it behind the scenes, but at least from what's reported, they're not at least gauging what they can get for Lamar. That surprises me. And I expect him to be back in Baltimore. I don't know what that relationship is going to be like moving forward, but that is something else you got to keep an eye on, because you do not want a disgruntled quarterback at the position that's most important in the league moving forward, because it causes more drama than what it's worth. So, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I look at Lamar Jackson and I see a guy that I think he's an underrated thrower. I don't think he's an amazing thrower, but I think some people that say he's got this noodle arm or anything like that is ridiculous. I think what's kind of held him back a little bit is I just don't think the receiving core that the Ravens have kind of built around him is very good, other than their tight end. You look at guys like Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay, and they've wanted them to blossom with Lamar, and you get rid of Hollywood Brown, and sure, he may not be a wide receiver one, but he's certainly a guy you want in the rotation, I would think, as part of your wide receiving core. And I know there's a lot of talk in terms of like, you bring in Lamar Jackson, you have to build the offense around him, and especially with the running ability, that changes everything. And I think that's okay. I think you want to add a different dynamic to the game. I think there's been a lot of stuff that's gone against Lamar Jackson, whether it be organizationally, that I think sometimes he gets criticized for unfairly. And other aspects, I think I look at the contract he's negotiating for. I think he's totally valid when it comes to trying to get as much money as you can, especially that Deshaun Watson deal that came in for the Browns. Just all that guaranteed money, a fully guaranteed $200 million deal. I think that's something he's trying to gun for. And whether it be, because he's not being represented by an agent, NFL teams don't want to negotiate with him because they don't feel like they're being negotiated in fairness. In my mind, I look at what's going on, and I just see some of the NFL squads, they don't want to have a Deshaun Watson situation when it comes to doling out so much guaranteed money, because I think that just kind of breaks the bank for them. And so we heard after Deshaun Watson signed with the Browns for all that money, how there were grumblings from the owners talking about how like this is totally reshaping the market. It's going to screw up negotiations for the future, because the Browns were so desperate to try and get a quarterback to shape things for that organization that they were willing to go to the guy that's got multiple lawsuits against him and throw out so much cash to kind of get the problem out of the way. I think it just kind of comes down to what owners want in terms of cash. I agree with you. I think eventually Lamar Jackson will go back to the Ravens. I think he's just so implanted in that organization, and they've built so much of the guys around him that it'd be really tough for me to see them move on from him and try and find somebody that could do as much as Lamar Jackson can do on the football field. And I'm a Raven. I like the Ravens teams. They've always been consistently good squads. Their teams, you kind of mentioned with the Patriots, they usually have high floors, sometimes lower ceilings because of it, but they're still pretty consistently good. But without Lamar Jackson, I think that whole, you get your Pro Bowl alternate there and Huntley, Tyler Huntley, and or some I've heard say good value Lamar Jackson, but nonetheless, I think Lamar is just way too valuable for that organization to just be left aside like that. And shockingly, I'm still kind of surprised just how quickly other organizations went to reporters and were like, yeah, we're not interested in Lamar. As soon as he got that non-exclusive tag, a whole bunch of teams, you heard from the Commanders, you heard from, any sort of needy quarterback team, you would think, oh, that's a great fit. They've done all of us. The Falcons especially was a team that we heard a lot about that could go after Lamar Jackson. So quickly say no. Something's a little bit suspicious to me, and I think it has to do with the lack of an agent, the amount of guaranteed money that Lamar is going after. But just kind of looking at everything else, nothing other than maybe for the Bengals getting Orlando Brown. Instead of protecting Patrick Mahomes, he gets the next best thing in Joe Burrow to protect. Gets the big left tackle money. Little surprised. I thought maybe he and the Chiefs would work something out, but nonetheless, I think that's a big acquisition for the Bengals. I feel like we say it every year. Their offensive line, they need to protect Joe Burrow as much as they can. And unfortunately for the Bengals, they did try to invest in offensive line last offseason, but we saw a bunch of injuries to the offensive line as the season kind of progressed and kind of impacted Burrow again. But I think it's a great signing for the Bengals. And other than that, nothing too crazy in the AFC North for me. Is there any signings that kind of stick out to you that you want to talk about?
Well, the Bengals, it's not so much who they got, it's more so who they lost. You notice that they lose both their starting safeties and Von Bell and Jesse Bates. I say what you want about them, whether you believe they're wherever they are in the ladder, but losing two starters in a defense that's grown together is a tough pill to swallow. So that's one thing to pay attention to. If you're the Bengals on a defense that consistently gets better, how they make do with the departure of two guys that have been. Jesse Bates has been there for a while. He was one of the leaders, one of the foundational pieces of that defense since the Joe Burrow era began. So it'll be interesting to see if there's growing pains for that back end moving forward. When it comes to the Steelers, listen, you mentioned the Ravens and the Patriots. I put the Steelers in that same department. It's technically very much a little bit of the same team. They might actually get worse depending on who they lose. They got rid of Miles Jackson, who's at the very worst case an athlete that can be put in positions to succeed. And Devin Bush hasn't been re-signed yet. Why that is, I don't know. But those are two inside linebackers for you that go above and beyond on every play and whatnot. You replace them with Cole Holcomb. Yeah, it could be a wash, but again, when you lose two foundational pieces of a defense, what does that spell moving forward? Will there be growing pains to start the season? And you and I know better than most. You don't want to put yourself in a position early on where you're having to need wins later on in the season. You'd rather make sure everything's set in stone early on rather than having to grow it out later in the year. So if I'm a Steelers fan, if I'm a Bengals fan, that's the concern I've got. When it comes to the Browns, I think everyone knows it's the status of Deshaun Watson, him staying on the field and him getting back to the Deshaun Watson before the scandal began. So I don't know what to make of the Browns. The Steelers, again, should compete. Kenny Pickett, another year under his belt. Will he, separate his label as a franchise quarterback? We'll see. But when it comes to contention, I think most of us can agree that it's either the Bengals or the Ravens for the taking, obviously contingent on Lamar Jackson being there.
100%. Moving on to the AFC South, and this AFC South, one of the weaker divisions I find in the NFL, especially the last couple of seasons. One of the reasons why is the Houston Texans. And the Texans, they've been spending some money. They got a new head coach in there, D'Amico Ryans, the former defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. And they've gotten a couple of moves in. They were able to sign Noah Brown, former Dallas Cowboy, who I remember from the Jaguars game, had the ball go through his hands and give up the game-winning interception in that game. So that was a fun watch. Robert Woods comes in, and he's a guy that's... I always found he was good with the Rams. He's a good receiver to have on your squad. Not a wide receiver 1 or anything like that, but I think like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, some depth. Robert Woods joining the squad. And then, kind of looking elsewhere, they bring in a guy in Sheldon Rankins, Hassan Ridgeway, Jimmy Ward expected to sign with the Texans as well. They bring in Shaq Mason, acquired in a trade with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Scott Quisenberry as well, center. So a lot of moves coming for the Texans so far as they kind of continue their rebuild. Looking at the Colts, and this was a sign that sort of happened, I think, just before we started recording, but Gardner Minshew is joining the Indianapolis Colts. And so a cheap deal, 1 year, $3.5 million. Incentives could make it go up to $5.5 million. Gardner Minshew is a guy for me that I think is a guy who's a starter in this league, as far as I'm concerned. And that's saying for somebody that was a backup in Philly. He played against the Cowboys. I've seen him play, and he wasn't his best game, but it was against a really solid defense, the Cowboys. And so I think he's a guy that could start, especially considering some of the other options that the Colts have had in the years past. I don't think that's a bad option to have in there. And so that's kind of one of the more major signings. They also re-signed Ashton Dulin on a 2-year deal. They cut Matt Ryan. The Matt Ryan era is over before it really even began in Indianapolis. Another team in the Jacksonville Jaguars that I always circle and kind of keep a close eye on. And they re-signed CJ Beathard as a backup. They bring in the BC Lions quarterback there, Nathan Rourke, to also be part of the depth chart and back up Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be weird for Rourke not having Henry Burris in that coaching staff anymore, but nonetheless, that familiarity on the CFL side. But also, I think not really an addition when it comes to free agency or trades or anything like that. More what they got last season that they're finally going to get this season, and that's Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver 1 coming off of the gambling suspension. Domestic violence, 4-game suspension in the NFL, gambling on games a whole year. So just keep that in mind when it comes to if you're going to get in trouble, think about what you're going to get in trouble for in the NFL. And then the Tennessee Titans just continue to be a team that I just find disappointing. And I think they're going to go into a rebuild here. They signed Andre Dillard on the offensive line. Tannehill, that sort of deal. I mean, I think the Titans are in a rebuild mode right now, and they were kind of benefactors of a weak division. But that's just kind of a look at the AFC South. Anything else that really kind of sticks out to you from those squads that kind of you want to talk about?
Well, I think you hit it on the nail on the coffin, and I think it's just an uninspired division. I don't see any noise coming out of this division. I think with Jacksonville, we continue to see their ascendancy. We continue to see Trevor Lawrence and company grow as a unit. Evan Ingram's coming back, so that is a major weapon to keep around, who had a great finish to last season. When it comes to the Colts, I think that's the team that of all the teams that's been most disappointing, at least since the COVID era started. That this is a team that had all the cap space in the world. They had all this money to play with, and they keep screwing it up with their quarterback. And it's crazy. I'm not saying they need a replacement level quarterback to make some noise, but there were opportunities to get a lot of quarterbacks. Matt Stafford was one of them. And with that talent on that roster over the years, with all that cap space, we got a Matt Stafford. I believe we would have been discussing the Colts as a team up there with, the Chiefs, the Bengals and such. Now you look back on it, we're in 2023 now, and yeah, Gardner Minshew's nice. He's a quality quarterback in this league, but he's not someone that's going to lead them even to a division title. I like to say so. I'm just saying right now that the Colts had a big opportunity to make some noise these past few years, and it's a shame that they couldn't get it done. When it comes to the rest of the division, the Titans, nothing. Again, I say uninspiring. There's nothing. They're going to be competent. You say it's a rebuild. I think I don't know about rebuild, because I think there's a lot of talent left on the squad. The reports saying that they're trying to get rid of Derrick Henry. I know people want to say Derrick Henry's the bread and butter of this team, but again, this is a team that's had a good defense over the years. They've had a lot of injuries over the years, and they just somehow win games. So I still expect this team to be up there in terms of teams you look at. It's like, okay, the Titans are coming to town. Expect a tough out. And with the Texans, you look at them, obviously they get the new head coach. I think if there's one team I'm looking forward to watching this division, it's going to be seeing how this, I will say, a revamped roster responds to a guy like D'Amico Ryans, who you hear rave reviews about from San Francisco. You hear rave reviews about people who've been around the Houston Texans because he is a former player there. So knowing his calling cards defense, I expect the Texans to put a better output there on defense. I think their offense is still going to be the dumpster fire of the league, even with a high quality rookie quarterback coming in, whether that's a CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, etc. There's just nothing there, similar to what Trevor Lawrence went through in his year one. Nothing there that's gonna expect him to hit the ground running. So this is Jacksonville or bust. I don't see how Jacksonville doesn't win this division and continue their growth in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. This is the Jaguars' division to win. I'm interested to hear your thoughts before we move on, just in terms of the Colts. And we mentioned their quarterbacks before, and it sounds like they're a little passive on Lamar Jackson, and they braided a Gardner Minshew. Are the Colts kind of a team for you to kind of keep an eye on to get a rookie quarterback? I know they've been kind of reluctant in years past and not getting the rookie quarterback, relying on the veteran QB to lead their offense. Now they're kind of in a point where they've tried it so many times. I think if the franchise gets another veteran quarterback, I think they might riot within themselves. And so now I think is the time for them to get a young quarterback. Do you think that's what the Colts will do here? Or do you think they just kind of maintain pace? They say, look, we got a guy in Gardner Minshew. I know he's on a low contract, and certainly like at worst could be a quality backup. But they kind of look at what they've got. They cut Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger, whatever you want to say about him on that depth chart, coming from University of Texas. He had a couple of looks for this Colts team as well. What do you think about the QB situation for the Colts? Do you think they go out and get a quarterback in the draft, or do you think they kind of stick with the veteran route?
Listen, they've had, I think Colts fans having a riot would be an understatement. I know, like, you're at number 4 there. Number 4, and anywhere up to like the top 5, maybe top 10, you're looking for a franchise-altering talent. So it's one thing if you get past Bryce Young. For me, it's Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then everybody else. If, let's say, if I'm looking at the order right now, Carolina and Houston take those 2. Is Indianapolis comfortable taking either a Will Levis, an Anthony Richardson at 4? I don't think they'd pull that trigger if it's for one of those 2. If CJ Stroud or Bryce Young are left on that board, I think they take one of those 2 because they can't afford any more busts at quarterback. And I don't, when I say busts, I don't mean, I'm not saying guys like Carson Wentz was a bust for them because they still put out a winning record with them. But when I say busts, I mean in terms of accommodating the high ceiling we've expected from them with their talent level for the past 2 years. We expect a quarterback that's going to win you games, not lose you games, like the guys Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz have done over the past couple of years. So that is the question that's going to be asked from the Colts. When number 4 hits and let's say Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are off the table, do you pull the trigger on the other quarterbacks? And for me, based on my opinion on the rest of the quarterbacks, I wouldn't do it at number 4. So I'd be interested to see what the Colts would think of that.
Interesting.
Of what they think of the other quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah, no, interesting. It's interesting to me because I'm a little bit higher on Anthony Richardson. Because I think he's a guy that's like raw, obviously, and the ceiling is like, we're talking like superstar level when it comes to Anthony Richardson. You just look at the athlete himself, but then you have to go into question like, well, the athletic ability is so totally there with Anthony Richardson. He's fast. He can throw the ball, in drills, he can throw the ball really well, but as a football player, what can he do at the next level? I think he's a guy that you can take a waiver on as long as you have, ironically enough, in the case of the Colts, a veteran quarterback in front to kind of, and let Richardson kind of develop in the system. You look at quarterbacks kind of similar to him And I say similar in terms of coming out of college. They're raw. In the case of Josh Allen, he was a raw talent, had this cannon of an arm, could run the ball a little bit coming out of college. He was just inaccurate as all hell. Like, there was a lot of concern about accuracy in his case. Patrick Mahomes, he was also considered more of a project. He had all the tools there. He seemed like a guy you could mold into. And then he's a guy that's able to, be behind Alex Smith for a year, learn the system under Andy Reid. Then he's able to hop in a year afterwards. And obviously we see how Patrick Mahomes has done. Josh Allen, he had a little bit of that. They went with Tyrod Taylor and Nathan Peterman as well, kind of going back and forth. And Allen kind of had to be thrown in the mix a little bit there. And I heard an interesting, scouting report in terms of some of these quarterbacks, is that, especially in the case of Josh Allen, is how he was able to develop was he had that running ability. He was electric on the ground, so that while he was developing his ability to throw and get comfortable with the receivers, he can add that extra element of his game of running on the ground while he's developing, if that makes any sense. And so Anthony Richardson's a guy that, obviously we saw in college. He's got the tape that he could, evade defenders. He could extend the play. And he has the arm talent there. Can he, in a situation where the veteran QB goes down, can he jump in, be able to adapt to the NFL game, and then just kind of continue to grow and mold? Lamar Jackson a little bit as well kind of had that in terms of that extra element to his game as he was developing. Nonetheless, just interested in your thoughts. We're definitely going to do like a deep dive into the NFL draft, because I find this draft class fascinating, especially on the QB side, some of the players coming in. But nonetheless, that is the AFC South. One last division, the AFC, before we move on to the NFC, and that's the AFC West. A division last year before heading into the season, we were talking about how it was an arms race. Like, all these teams were getting all these players. This is going to be the best division in football. Like, not all these teams are going to make the playoffs. Like, who's going to be able to get in? And then we kind of go through the season, and then we realize, maybe this division wasn't really what we thought it would be. Especially in the case of this team, in the Denver Broncos, they make that big acquisition for Russell Wilson. Obviously, that season did not go as planned. Quite the opposite, actually. And so now they regroup. They bring in Sean Payton. They've got that Walmart money now for ownership, and they are trying to make a big splash. In the case of the Broncos. And so this is kind of another example of them trying to turn it around within a year. And so they go out, they get a backup for Russell Wilson. They get Jarrett Stidham on a 2-year deal, $10 million contract. Samaje Perine, he's a solid running back. I like him coming into this system as well with Peyton. They signed Mike McGlinchey. They were able to take away McGlinchey from the Bears on a 5-year, $87.5 million deal. They also bring in Ben Powers to help shore up the offensive line as well. A shout out to a former CFLer, Alex Singleton, linebacker, former Calgary Stampeder. He's able to re-sign with the team on a 3-year, $18 million contract. The Chiefs, they've had some losses so far in terms of a free agency. We mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster earlier. Also losing their offensive tackle, but they gain an offensive tackle back in Jawan Taylor. I don't know if it's going to be an improvement, much the same, but they do get an offensive tackle in Jawan Taylor, 4-year, $80 million deal. And then we got to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's just a laundry list of players that they've acquired, trying to turn this ship around. Jimmy Garoppolo is the answer in Las Vegas, according to the Raiders. He signed on a 3-year, $72.75 million deal. I think for a guy of his caliber, that's a solid contract to bring him in on. I don't know if he's better than Derek Carr skill-wise, but he's more accomplished than Derek Carr in the NFL. And I think to be able to bring him in, and a guy that I think the locker room can get around, I think we'll see how he does in Las Vegas. They get Josh Jacobs on the non-exclusive franchise tag. They also re-sign Amir Abdullah. Bunch of receivers, Philip Dorsett, Jacoby Myers. After giving the Raiders the win last year, he gets to join the Raiders now this season and actually help them win games as a member of the squad. And then a couple of other different signings here, but just a big laundry list of items here. Then for the Chargers, hey, they signed Eric Kendricks, solid left linebacker in the latter half of his career, but still you could try and get some production out of him. And Easton Stick, not to be confused with a hockey stick. He re-signs on a 1-year, $1.8 million deal as a backup. And so after really an arms race last year for this division, now it just seems to be a reloading phase, especially for the Raiders coming into this offseason.
So yeah. This division, it's crazy how quick in 1 year it's turned upside down. We were expecting it to be one of the division for the ages, with all those moving parts, all the excitement around each team in the division, and now we're here a year later, and it seems like, well, I guess what we expected a couple years ago when it was just the Chiefs moving forward, is that it's the Chiefs and everybody else. And for me, that's how I feel. When you look at the Raiders and the Broncos, you see that both head coaches are slowly putting their footprint on the squad. You see with the Broncos, Sean Payton, it seems like they're shopping their receivers, but they don't want to get rid of all of them, because we know Sean Payton, he likes to throw the ball around. It should be a good fitting with Russell Wilson, but we don't know if this is the Russell Wilson that we expect, or if this is the Russell Wilson from last year, as in the Russell Wilson of last year was just a disaster. And you shore up the offensive line, that's one thing, but it comes down to him at the end of the day. Is he what he is, or is he what he once was? So that will be interesting. They revamped their defense, bringing in Vance Joseph, a respected mind in the league. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust with that change. They've had many changes over the years. They've had Vic Fangio. They've had, what's his name? I don't want the guy who went to Carolina. I'm going to say Avero. I forget how his first name is, but another quality defensive coordinator. But you keep changing defensive coordinators, it's tough to keep up with the same high quality of play. There's got to be a substantial dip at some point, and it could be this year. So that would be an eye to keep on, is can this Broncos defense keep that high standard that they've been accustomed to the past few years or not? Mm-hmm. The Chiefs, listen, Travis Kelce said it best. It was expected to be a rebuild year, and they won the Super Bowl. So there's no point in, at least during this Kelce Mahomes era, to cast any aspersions that they're going to have a dip. This is a team that's going to be staying in contention for as long as Patrick Mahomes is there for. And anybody who says anything otherwise needs to reevaluate their mental psyche. Now, moving forward with the other two teams, you say with the Raiders, is Jimmy Garoppolo better than Derek Carr? Talent-wise, you'd probably say no. But what I know for a fact, based on the evidence provided in front of me, is that Jimmy Garoppolo wins games. And say what you want about, how he does it. He's very game manager-like. He was, let's keep it real, one throw, which was probably, I think, a yard from Emmanuel Sanders' hands away from winning a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes and company. Mm-hmm. So to say that you can't get it done with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think is a disservice to him. Mm-hmm. He's won big games already in his career. He'll probably continue to win big games. And if there's ever a landing spot for Anthony Richardson, I think the Raiders make the most sense with the contract they gave to Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, for this season, can the Raiders make some noise? Listen, they're a team that they've got a high ceiling too. There's some days where you look at them. I remember they had that Monday night game against the Chiefs last year where they took it to them. And then they have games where they just fall apart. That will be the key for the Raiders. Can they be consistent in the output they put out there? Can the offense continue to put up points that we expect them to with the weapons they've got? And can the defense just be better? Because it hasn't been a good defense. So that's something with the Raiders. And damn, I'm just going on a spiel right here.
No, it's all good. I love it. I love it. I love the analysis.
But yeah, with the Chargers now, we're looking at it. I think what you see from the Chargers is that last year was their year, and they're slowly starting to see that contract extension for Justin Herbert coming in, and they're slowly starting to prep themselves, which is why you're hearing the noise about Khalil Mack being traded away. The Chargers were everybody's trendy hipsters pick to make it out of the AFC, maybe even win the Super Bowl with all those acquisitions they made. And the way they fell last season in the playoffs, even the way they fell in some games last year, they got smacked by the Seahawks at home one game. They got smacked by the Jags in another game at home. And in spite of all that, they're the only team that consistently competes with the Chiefs from minute 1 to minute 60. So I'm not expecting the Chargers to be a disappointment this year, but I think if we're going to look at a team that has a high ceiling with a lower floor, I expect the Chargers to have games where we see more of that low floor more than their high ceiling. And they're the team I still see can make the playoffs in the dogfight that is the AFC, but it's going to take some leaps and bounds from this coaching staff and that roster to really put it together and finally be that team that we all expect them to be.
Yeah, and I'm quite honestly shocked that Brandon Staley is still there as the head coach of the Chargers. I know they got rid of Joe Lombardi, and we know a couple of Chargers fans in our circles, and know that Joe Lombardi was not the biggest the biggest. He was not a hero to a lot of the Chargers fans. Let's just go with that. In terms of the play calls for Justin Herbert, I think they've got an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. Skill-wise, he's shown that he can play at a high level. I think he's got good weapons around him. They bring back Keenan Allen as well, if I recall. It was thought that maybe he would be one of those roster cuts, but they're able to restructure the deal and keep him around. I just look at the Chargers, man, and it feels like for 15 years we've been saying, God, this Chargers team is good. On paper, they got all the pieces in place. They're going to be really, really good. And then they have this unbelievable regular season, and then they just never able to put it together in the playoffs and even get to a Super Bowl. I mean, the last Chargers team that I could think of where I'm like, man, this is a great squad, and they were pretty close, was when they went to the AFC Championship that year when Phillip Rivers was playing on a torn ACL, if I recall correctly, and that was the latter years of LaDainian Tomlinson before he went to the Jets. And that Chargers squad, post Mike Schottenheimer, is just, or Marty Schottenheimer, it just feels like every year on paper they've got a good squad. They're just never able to put it together. And so I'm hopeful for Chargers fans that they are, like, because they've just been like repeatedly slapped in the face for so many years and teased with all this talent on that squad, and they just they show glimpses of it, and I think their quarterback's really good, and we'll see what happens with Austin Eckler. I think that kind of throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into that situation with him requesting a trade, and but I'm fascinated as well to see how Kellen Moore does, filling in for Joe Lombardi as the offensive coordinator. As somebody that had seen the play calls for Kellen Moore, and I think he's a decent to solid play caller. There were a couple of times last year where Kellen Moore could really, pull some hair when it comes to some of his play calls. If you loved curl routes, oh my God, Chargers fans, you're gonna love them, because there's gonna be a lot of curl routes in your future, some jumbo packages, throwing some offensive linemen in a fullback, and I thought for sure with the way that Moore loves his running backs, the way he did with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, that maybe Eckler would fit in just well in that system. And they also have some pretty good depth running backs there, but nonetheless, Eckler kind of deciding, this is not for me. And so we'll see how that sort of situation plays out. And that's it for the AFC. If there's anything additional from the AFC side you want to talk about, we can move on to the NFC and just kind of look what's going on there. We'll start in the NFC East.
Well, how about you tell me your early, very early
don't put that on me. Don't put that on me. I can't make a pick now. Not with more days to go in free agency. I can't make the pick.
Well, that's why I said very early. It's a very early AFC pick. I won't hold you to it. This is a very early March 16th at 8:16 p.m. Eastern time. Prediction.
Who am I picking? All right.
It's flexible. It's flexible. This is all right. It's the it's something that's dynamic.
Okay.
We'll say. So just give me an early pick. Give me your AFC Championship game and who wins it. Just give me that.
All right. I like it. I like how you're turning the tables on me. I'm not expecting this. Now I got to use my brain and think of where this is going to go. I'm going to pick Chiefs in the AFC Championship. I know that's an easy pick, but that team's still just the depth that they have and just how well coached they are. I know they lose their offensive coordinator to Washington, but as long as Andy Reid is there, he's all good. I'm going to pick the Chiefs. I'm going to pick the Bengals. I know it's an easy pick. I know people, I want to say I really want to say Miami. I really, really want to say Miami. A part of me wants to say the Bills. But I look at the moves that both those teams make. They done so much by not doing a lot, if that makes any sense. Like they keep a bunch of their core guys. Really, in the case of the Chiefs, they lose their left tackle, but they still have your Travis Kelce, as you mentioned, your Patrick Mahomes. And they lose Juju, yes, but I think they'll be able to find a receiver in the draft that will kind of fill in. They got Kadarius Toney now. Maybe he blossoms into that wide receiver one that we thought maybe he would in New York. So I'm going to say AFC Championship game, Chiefs and Bengals, with the Bengals winning the AFC Championship game. That's my pick. But it's dynamic. It's fluid. I'm not locking it in or anything like that. A lot could change. There could be another, earth-swelling trade in that conference that totally changes my mind. But if you were to put a gun in my head and I had to predict right now, only like a day or two into the new season, who's going to be in the AFC Championship game, I'm going to be simple. I'm going to say Chiefs and Bengals. I'm going to say the Bengals are going to win. But keep an eye on those Dolphins is what I will say on that. NFC East. You know what? I'm going to put you to you put me on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot.
I thought I'd get away with that. I thought I would.
No. I was thinking about it. It's like, do I let him off? It's like, no. He put me on the spot on my own show. I got to put him on the spot now. You got to tell me AFC Championship right now. Who's in it and who's winning it? Who's winning that game and going to the Super Bowl?
So with obviously a lot of things haven't been processed or announced yet. So we can only say if or allegedly. Now, if there's a trade that happens where the Jets do acquire Aaron Rodgers, with every ounce of objectivity that I have in my body, I see that AFC Championship game being in Kansas City, where the Chiefs host a Jets team that's going to struggle early on, but then slowly put it together.
Wow.
And you're going to see an Aaron Rodgers Jets squad winning a couple of road playoff games, going into Arrowhead, and winning one more road playoff game, similar to what the Bucks and Brady did in his first year.
Okay.
And they take out oddly enough, they took out Aaron Rodgers that year, but this time it's Aaron Rodgers that takes out the top dog in the AFC, makes his return to a Super Bowl, first one since the 2010-2011 season, and they knock off the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I won't put a score out there just because, like I said, it's very early. It's a dynamic prediction. So, but yeah, we got Jets, Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Jets winning.
Wow, there you go. Mm-hmm. I like it. You're going all the way with the Jets.
Objective again.
Objective.
This is objectivity at its finest. This is every ounce, every pound of myself being put into that objective opinion. The Jets get back to a Super Bowl.
I love it. All right, we're bringing the takes here. That's why I do this podcast. We do it for the takes. I love this take. We're gonna move on to the NFC. Then, and I guess we'll have to do that exercise once we get through all the divisions in the NFC and determine. And I'll try to be objective as well. But nonetheless, we'll go to the NFC East and a team that I will always be objective for, the Dallas Cowboys. They're the team, I love this team, Mehran. I love this team. They put me through so much for so many years. I've had to see them lose in heartbreaking fashion multiple times in the last decade. Some of those games coming from your team, the Green Bay Packers. I think back to 2016 when it seemed like the Cowboys were going to get over the hump with a rookie Dak and a rookie Zeke. And lo and behold, Aaron Rodgers, he comes back and toe tap inside and and that field goal, and just broke my heart when I watched that game. I thought we were finally getting over the hump. Dak was the solution, and a couple years later, and I'm not as confident of Dak being the solution, but I know for sure Zeke isn't the solution because he got cut on Wednesday. I was thinking about making a joke starting off the program, being like, man, everybody's talking about this guy, a guy that's contributed so much to the franchise, one of the best players at his position, and man, Zeke Elliott, just unbelievable player. He was definitely regressing the last couple of years. That contract was not good. It was not a good contract, especially for running backs. I think Todd Gurley was kind of an early indicator on that when it came to paying hefty for a lot of these backs. And Zeke, while I still think he could be a contributor to a team, I don't think he's a running back, an RB1 anymore. I think he's a good change of pace back, maybe a third down back. And I think he'll eventually sign with the team. I saw somebody say bring him to Buffalo. That could be interesting. I'd be interested in that. But I am happy that Tony Pollard looks like he's going to stick around as he gets the non-exclusive franchise tag. Leighton Vander Esch re-signs on a 2-year, $11 million contract. I thought he was going to be gone, but he's a guy that, at his peak, when he was there with Jalen Smith on the linebacking core, I thought we got ourselves a stud linebacker. Hasn't really hit that projection, but still I think a guy you can put in as a solid starter, and right there with Micah Parsons, I think is solid, and I think works well under the system that they've got there. Donovan Wilson as well. He's more of a hard-hitting safety. I'm glad that they were able to re-sign him. I think it's a good contract that they got him in. But the deal I'm really liking from the Dallas Cowboys was the trade for Stephon Gilmore. Only having to
goodness, Kyo, can we get off the Cowboys, man?
I need to
get
be
here all day talking.
I'm trying to bring the analysis. Okay, look, I'm trying to be objective. I'm trying to bring the best analysis for the listeners. And so, look, I know the ins and outs of the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, I gotta bring the knowledge. Stephon Gilmore getting traded from the Colts to the Cowboys for a 2023 5th round compensatory pick. Really like that acquisition. It'll be great. Side by side with Trayvon Diggs, really liking that. And Deron Bland, keep an eye on his name on the defensive back core as well for the Cowboys. I'm done with the Cowboys. We're all good. That's all they've done so far in free agency. And then there's the Giants, the Eagles, and the Commanders. But who cares about those squads? It's all about the Dallas Cowboys. That's what this podcast is, right? No, I'll talk about the other teams as well. Hey, Daniel Jones, he's sticking around for the Giants. Saquon Barkley also looks like he's sticking around on that non-exclusive franchise tag. Sterling Shepard, a Giants legend at this point, he's sticking around. Matt Breida, hey, you remember him? He's re-signing. But the big move I think a lot of people will be talking about with the Giants other than Daniel Jones is the trade for Darren Waller, which I think kind of came out of nowhere for me personally. I wasn't expecting it. I knew that Waller had kind of been in talks to potentially be traded. I wasn't expecting him to go to the Giants, but gets a new option for Daniel Jones. It sounded like they were trying to go a receiver route, not finding the guy that they want. It's like, well, let's just go tight end and see what we got here. And so Darren Waller, he gets the trade from the Raiders to the Giants. The Philadelphia Eagles, I've been very happy about their downfall in recent weeks. Just seeing all those players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, leaving the squad. I know that they got some guys back. They were able to get Fletcher Cox on a hometown deal. Good for them. Brandon Graham, they get him on a hometown deal. Oh, good for them. But hey, seems like they were able to work things out with Darius Slay. Hey, good for them. That's great on them. But couple of key pieces on the defensive side. Still not solved for the Eagles. Coming off of a season, going to the Super Bowl. I'm not bitter at all about that. But Boston Scott, I will say, I do like him as a running back. I think they got him on a good deal as well. $2 million 1 year. I think he's a really solid running back on that depth chart. And they bring in Rashad Penny as well. And, he's a guy that had some potential coming out and just never really able to get it. I believe injuries really just kind of did a number on him. And then in the case of the Commanders, Jacoby Brissett comes into the Commanders squad, and Andrew Wiley as well on the offense. Deron Payne receives the franchise tag, and he was able to later sign a big-time deal. Not Aaron Donald money, but it was pretty darn close. Deron Payne, a really solid defensive lineman that I do fear when it comes on that defensive line for Washington. And Washington, I think, is a good team. It's just it's Washington. They have had so much off the field stuff with Snyder and everything else. And so I'll finally get off my high horse on the NFC East. I've said what I needed to say. I could go on more about how great the Cowboys are and how, I could talk about how they're in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. They're in the Jerry Jeudy sweepstakes. They could get OBJ. I could talk about all that, but I'm not going to do that because I care about the good listener, Mehran. And so I want you to look at the NFC East. Tell me why the Cowboys are not going to make the playoffs this year. I want you to tell me why I'm overhyping them. I want you to knock me down a couple of pegs here, Mehran.
See, on paper, as much as I'd love to say the Cowboys aren't going to make the playoffs and they're going to be this disappointment, which they tend to do every couple of years, there is always a disappointment, whether it's at the end of the season or whether it's at the beginning and it trickles down the rest of the year. The Cowboys disappoint their fans at some point, unless there's a Super Bowl on top of what they've done. Nothing is enough. Yep. Even in that Dak rookie year, the way that they lost after they put together a historic season, I'm sure Cowboys fans couldn't stomach that. The way this year transpired after they beat the Bucs and Tom Brady in Tampa, they trounce them, and then they lose against the San Francisco 49ers in a dog slugfest, whatever you want to call it, where they can't put up enough points.
Yeah,
disappointment
Zeke gets run over. Yeah.
Anyways, that being mentioned,
open it up some more moves there. I appreciate that.
The Cowboys are going to beat some good teams, but they're also going to lose to some teams. I know that happens in the NFL, but what I'm trying to say is they're that team that there's some times where they just play to the level of their opponent. And thankfully, now, at least better than recent years, the NFC East has finally caught up to the league. This is a tough division once again. This is slowly getting back to being, even in their down years, but more so now, this is the trademark division of the NFL where the eyes are on it all the time. The Eagles coming back from the Super Bowl. The Giants are a good team. Like, let's just keep it real. They are a good team from top to bottom, and they've got a coach that has finally gotten it right for them. It's taken a while since Tom Coughlin, but they finally got it right with Brian Daboll. And then the Commanders, the question mark isn't so much with what's on their roster, because they have a decent roster. They won some games last year. Is Bieniemy and Sam Howell the answer on offense? Is that going to be what brings them back to the playoffs? That's the question mark. I don't know much about Sam Howell. Maybe you I know you do, because he won his first NFL game against the Cowboys last year. But with that being said, I just don't know. That's a question mark. But they filled up their roster rather well, man. If there's a team that's going to help a second-year quarterback, it's going to be what the Commanders did. They bring in a couple of offensive linemen and Andrew Wiley, Nick Gates. They re-signed Deron Payne, like you said, and they brought in some quality players on defense. They got Cam Dantzler, who's not a bad corner from the Vikings. I've seen him for a couple of years. I'm not saying he's a world beater, but he's competent. And and Washington needs players like that to assure some depth. So it'll be interesting to see how the Commanders respond to the way they ended last year, where it looked like they were going to be a playoff team and it didn't end up happening. I think the Eagles, I think it's a safe bet that, for me, that they won't have the same season that they did last year. I don't see, with the losses they've had on defense especially, that they can put off that dominant season again. I think Jalen Hurts, another year with tape on him. I think teams are going to be better equipped to respond to this Eagles offense. And can they keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket at all times, and we finally test out his arm on a consistent basis? I know he was able to do it last year, but with another season of film under the belts, it'll be interesting to see that one there. Cowboys, listen, they're going to be a good team. I'll give you that. They will be a good team. Will they be a great team? The defense will be great.
Yes.
We'll see about how Dak and company do on offense this year.
Yes, I was just gonna say I think this defense is gonna be totally looking at objective like you do with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Looking through the good lens here. I think this defense for the Cowboys, what they've been able to do, and just another year of Micah Parsons, and I think Trayvon Diggs kind of gets overhated. Maybe it's the Cowboys fandom in me, but I understood the early criticisms when he had all those interceptions starting off. It's like, oh, he's a guy. He jumps routes a lot. He's going to get burned a lot. He's more of a gambler at defensive back. I think he's a lot more relaxed this year. I think he's more of a shutdown corner than people want to give him respect for. And so I think he's a little bit overhated just because he plays for the Cowboys. So I get it. The Cowboys are one of the most hated franchises in all of sports, so I get it. But defensively, I think this team is solid. I think, as you mentioned, the questions for the Cowboys right now in terms of receiver, you got CeeDee Lamb. I'm still iffy on him being a wide receiver one, a consistent wide receiver one, but I think he's still a receiver, obviously, that's very talented, and that could be a reliable pass catching option. They try to push up Noah Brown into the wide receiver two. It doesn't work. Michael Gallup, he's injured a lot. And so now you hear them trying to go after an OBJ, a Jerry Jeudy, try and round out the wide receiver, a DeAndre Hopkins. Buddy, if they get DeAndre Hopkins, I'm jumping on this desk. But nonetheless, I don't think that's going to happen. But if they're able to get another solid receiver, and we'll see what happens on the tight end front. They may lose Dalton Schultz in free agency. That will be a real tough blow because that's kind of the safety blanket for Dak Prescott, a real reliable tight end that Dak threw to a lot. And then it's going to be a question on if Tony Pollard could take on more carries. He was able to split with Ezekiel Elliott, and with being able to split the carries, he was quite the dynamic running back. I love Tony Pollard. I've been calling for him to start pretty much since he was drafted out of Memphis, 4th round. But now we're going to see.
Are you his agent? Why you gotta mention his university
I just throwing out
and
the
what
facts.
round he is? What are you his agent?
Whoa,
you marketing?
No, not at all. Hey, I'm just trying to bring the information for the good listener. That's all I'm doing. I'm just saying I'm a big fan of Tony Pollard. What's wrong with that? Tony Pollard.
I don't know what being from Memphis has to do with him being a good player and all that.
Hey, they produce some solid running backs at Memphis. I'm just telling you. Ever since Tony Pollard, there's been a couple of good running backs coming out of Memphis. That's what I'm saying. Just throwing out that knowledge right there. So if your Packers squad, they pick a running back out of Memphis, then you got a good running back. That's all I'm saying. I'm representing Memphis here on that one. But yeah, I'm all that to say, it's the Cowboys. They've broken my heart multiple times. I'm shocked that I've not gone bald from watching this team and just totally stress myself out and get these giant bags under my eyes. But I like this team. I'm still iffy on Mike McCarthy calling the plays. That's going to be a challenge. I know you've had to deal with Mike McCarthy as a head coach for your squad for a number of years, so I know that you've had the benefits and the challenges. Let's go with a Mike McCarthy led squad, but we'll see with him taking over the play calling duties. I'm not really a big fan of Brian Schottenheimer as the new offensive coordinator for the team, so we'll see there. But I agree with you in terms of defense, and then everywhere else, like I crap on the other teams because I like to keep the rivalry going, but. I agree with you. I look at this Giants squad. I think they're better this year. I think they're going to be a contending team for this division. I think the Eagles will take a step back. As you mentioned, I think more teams are going to figure out Jalen Hurts. And they lose a lot on defense. So I think they're still going to be a good team. Don't get me wrong, but I don't see them going back to a Super Bowl or even an NFC championship at this point. And then the Commanders, they're such a weird team. I feel like Ron Rivera should be gone. From that organization, maybe with Bieniemy in there now, it kind of tease the fires a little bit for Rivera and get him on the hot seat a little bit. Maybe Bieniemy eventually becomes head coach. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But the Commanders, I think they've got talent. Terry McLaurin always seems to be an underrated receiver. We always talk about how good he is, but we always seem to underrate him at the same time. It's kind of crazy. I really like that receiving core that they've got there. That rookie receiver they had last year, whose name escapes me all of a sudden, looks really, really good. It's just it's Washington, so you really just don't know what you're going to get with that squad. So that's the NFC East. Anything else you kind of wanted to point out? Do you want to continue to humble me in terms of my playoff aspirations for the Cowboys? Or?
No. Honestly, when you just mentioned Brian Schottenheimer, I had to do a quick Google search because I remember he was in Seattle with Russell Wilson. I just wanted to remember when he left. And then he left after their 2020 season, which is the last time they won the division. And listen, his track record. I don't know if there's any fans of the 2006 to 2011 New York Jets or the 2018 to 2020 Seattle Seahawks, but just from a wide lens, those teams performed pretty well. If you want me to give a track record,
sure.
Brian Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator when Mark Sanchez and company went to the AFC Championship game in back-to-back years, and then for Seattle from 2018 to 2020, I'm pretty sure those were Russell Wilson's best years throwing the football. So I'm not saying expect Dak to have career years all of a sudden or that the Cowboys will get over the hump. But if you're just looking based off that track, those two stints, there's got to be something encouraging there where it's not bleak. I know you said you're not too inspired by it, I'm paraphrasing, but there is performances on his resume where you go, he did a lot better than he should have there. So I think that if you're a Cowboys fan, you're curious about that offense and seeing how the season progresses, I think that's the department we got to focus on. How does Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy coexist for that offense?
Totally. So we'll move on from the NFC East. I've gotten off my little kickstand here and preaching to the choir about the Cowboys and knowing that they'll probably inevitably break my heart in a different fashion this year. The year before, it always seems to be the 49ers. I don't know. But I'll keep the faith. We'll keep the faith here, Mehran. But going to the NFC North, and we're going to talk about your team for a moment. And I know you'll get on your soapbox, and you'll talk about how great the Packers are, and how bad the Bears and the Lions and the Vikings are. But we'll go over some of the moves here. I gotta say, man, I gotta give a lot of credit to the Bears. I think they're having themselves. Obviously, you can't fully say they won because you got to see how it plays out on the field at the end of the day. But on paper, I look at some of the moves that the Bears have made, and I'm impressed with what they've been able to accomplish. Getting rid of the first overall pick and being able to get a wide receiver one in DJ Moore, I think is huge for them. And being able to slide back in the draft and get the 9th overall pick, and they could really do what they want there. They could trade back even further, get some more assets, and I quite like that deal that they made. I like them bringing in PJ Walker. I think he's a solid backup. Loved him in the XFL, and I think he was clearly the best quarterback for the Panthers at a couple of points when he was there. Tremaine Edmonds coming in at linebacker. TJ Edwards. I look at some of the moves so far and some of the moves that could come in. And also I just saw as well, they took one of your tight ends there as well from the Packers. Let me just pull up the name here. I just saw that the signing has been made, but he was the former Pro Bowler, or rather should have been a Pro Bowler, but didn't end up getting in the Pro Bowl that 1 year for Rodgers. And now the name escapes me, but I'll make sure to get you that name once I see it. But they steal a tight end from the Packers. And so I like the moves that the Bears have made. In the case of the Lions, speaking of taking players within their division, they take David Montgomery after losing Jamal Williams to free agency. Williams going to the Saints. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in this case for the Lions, a guy that they seem to like the dual running back thing with DeAndre Swift. Don't know if that means that they're not confident in Swift as a running back, the bell cow running back, or if it's just part of the new wave of offenses where you want to have multiple options at running back. But they bring in David Montgomery on a 3-year, $18 million deal. Alex Anzalone as well, linebacker. He comes in on a good deal as well. And then let's take a look at the moves that the Packers have made so far. They agreed to a 3-year deal with their lawn snapper. So a great deal there. And they also re-sign Kayshawn Nixon, their kick returner and punt returner, to a 1-year deal with a max value of $6 million. And that's all the moves the Packers made. So well done on winning free agency so far, Mr. Mehran. That's great stuff. And obviously, we anxiously await what happens with Aaron Rodgers in the end. And then, of course, the Minnesota Vikings, a team that's, we talk a lot about the Chargers in terms of like on paper, they have all this talent and they could do some things. And on paper, the Vikings, they could do some things. They've got one of, if not the best receiver in the game, in Justin Jefferson. Dalvin Cook, it looks like he's going to come back. We'll see when it comes to Dalvin. And then also some questions around Kirk Cousins. And that defense has usually been all right. And I just look at it now. Nothing too crazy. They bring back their backup running back in Alexander Madison. Nick Mullins re-signs on a 2-year, $4 million deal, so they shore up the backup there. But nonetheless, not too much in terms of like big. I mean, Marcus Davenport, I guess, on a 1-year, $13 million contract. I know they lose Kendricks, but yeah, it's just tell me about the NFC North. I know the Packers haven't made too many moves right now. I'm sure they've got all eyes and all hands on deck when it comes to completing this Rodgers deal. But just tell us, I guess, obviously as a Packers fan following Aaron Rodgers, what the loss for Rodgers will mean for the franchise and what you expect back in compensation.
Well, if again this trade were to happen, because it still hasn't transpired yet, so anything can happen, especially when it revolves around Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely the end of whatever you want to call it, whether it's half glass empty or half glass full. I know when he won the first Super Bowl, people were expecting him to win multiple. It didn't happen that way, but you still want to. The amount of dominance you have in a division like that it's fun. I know Cowboys fans can't relate over the past decade, but we've won. I can't even put my hand. I think I might have to use more than two hands to tell you how many divisions we've won. But,
okay, let's calm down now. Let's not go too crazy. Come on.
But basically what I'm trying to say is it was a successful period. If you're a Packers fan, it's a successful period. You have to witness a Hall of Fame quarterback flourish, win 4 MVPs, provide winning seasons, winning football. And I know it didn't result in a Super Bowl, but you still got to enjoy successful football. And it was better than being a Lions fan over the past decade plus or a Bears fan over the past decade plus. So yes. That's one thing. Now, when it comes to the possible pending departure of Aaron Rodgers, there's going to be a lot of eyes on Matt LaFleur and that coaching staff, because you have your quarterback now. You have full reins of the offense. There was so much about Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur coming to a compromise about how the offense is going to work. Well, now it's all Matt LaFleur. I'm assuming Jordan Love's not making any plans with Matt LaFleur to go over the offense. I think this is all Matt LaFleur moving forward, and they have their quarterback. Now let's see what it's all about. How does he respond to his first subpar season in Green Bay? The talent's still there. Like, I know we haven't made any signs. I think that comes with, that'll come in the aftermath of this possible trade happening. But the disappointing thing about the Packers last season was the talent on the roster didn't translate to the results. And there's a lot of games where they lost close games they should have won. And it all went down after the London game against the Giants. And you slowly started to see a trickling theme where the Packers couldn't separate themselves from teams. And then it just got to a point where the defense was just getting gashed in the second half and the team just couldn't make a move when fourth quarter came about. The defense is the question mark of this team. I know people are going to talk about the offense. I think the offense is going to be dependent on what players come in, as in who do we have to shore up the receiving core? How do those receivers progress? I think that's more of a wait and see approach. The defense, we've got our players. The players are there. It's more of putting the output there, because this defense should not play as poorly as they did last year. So for me, it was surprising to see Joe Barry come back as a defensive coordinator because of how poor the defense was last year, despite their strong finish. But there's no reason with guys like Rashawn Gary coming back, guys like Jair Alexander, guys like Devondre Campbell, and a lot of just good football players on that defense. There is no excuse for them to be subpar, to be average. So that is going to be what makes or breaks the Packers season. I'll let you take the reign now.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I was just
You have me all riled up. You have me all riled up talking about my team.
I got you fired up.
Like, how long have I been talking? I was just like, has it been 5 minutes? I don't know. But,
I'll take all the time you need. You heard what my Cowboys ran. I was going on and on. I was listing off the rounds that certain players were selected. I mean, it's okay. Like, flex the knowledge. It's okay. I mean, there's a lot happening with that franchise, and I look at that organization, and yes, you've gotten lots of years of winning football. Being able to transition from one Hall of Fame quarterback to another is very rare in the NFL. Going from Brett Favre, stealing from the poor Brett Favre, to Aaron Rodgers, and so you've had a lot of years of success.
I didn't even get a chance to talk. I didn't even think about talking about Jordan Love. That's yes. How much rambling I just did.
Well,
and just a quick tidbit on Jordan Love.
Of course,
he's going to be good, people. He's going to be really good.
That was the question I was going to ask.
If Aaron Rodgers, I know it took 3 years, but there must be some assurance that Jordan Love is the guy, because they wouldn't have kept with Jordan Love till now as the backup if it didn't mean that Jordan Love was a solution. We saw in the Eagles game last year, in a short sample size, that he can make throws and he can put the ball where it needs to be. And I think you're going to see more of that next season. And we'll have the luxury of it not having too much tape on Jordan Love, where I believe he'll flourish. Mm-hmm. We'll see if it actually happens.
I like the optimism that you're feeling the love. That's what's going on right now. You're feeling the love. If let's say, because I know Packers fans, they've had a lot of successful years with some great quarterbacks going all the way back in the 90s with Brett Favre. If Jordan Love, I'm not going to try and put too much pressure on him, but I think we can both agree he's probably not going to reach the levels of Aaron Rodgers. But if he gets into, like, let's just say Tony Romo level, where he's not a Hall of Famer, but he has a couple of good years, he's a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, can win you a couple of games, it's just sometimes in the playoffs he's not able to get it done, would Packers fans be satisfied?
I think it depends. I don't think it matters about the talent at the quarterback position as long as it translates to winning on the field. And I think that's what most Packers fans, again, speaking for myself, I think that's just all we want. We just want to hold the Lombardi again. And I know that sounds spoiled because it's only been, 12 years, I'd say, since it happened. But as long as Jordan Love isn't the reason we lose football games, I think Packers fans should be assured. But that's why I harped on this defense, because there's talent from player 1 to 53 on this roster. This defense should not be as poor as they were. So when it comes to Jordan Love, he'll get patience from the fans. I'm sure of that. Mm-hmm. For how long, that remains to be seen.
That's interesting. The patience part is really interesting to me, because we've heard, and I think not just Packers fans as well, but we've heard over the last couple of years with Jordan Love, his progression is not going so great, and it's a little bit up and down. And then he comes in, as you mentioned, that Eagles game, and what we saw, he looked really good. I think he will be good. I think there will be a little bit of an expectation just based on how everything has gone. Again, going from Brett to Aaron. Can Jordan be close to that level? I'm sure we're already going to hear from some pundits going to be like, can Jordan Love be the next Hall of Fame quarterback for the Green Bay Packers? And we'll see. I mean, they don't have Alan Lazard there, and we'll see in terms of the receiving core, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson as well. in terms of their development. Now, instead of getting the ball from Aaron Rodgers, they're going to get it from Jordan Love. We'll see where that chemistry kind of builds up. But I am fascinated to see how this Packers team does. It's don't want to speak for you too much, but it definitely feels like we're kind of witnessing a totally different era of Packers football that we haven't seen in quite a while. Obviously, with whenever Aaron Rodgers moves on from the Packers, which you mentioned is like it's Aaron Rodgers, anything could happen. I also say it's the New York Jets, and anything could happen with the Jets in terms of just them screwing it up, because I don't think people realize they don't have that much leverage. They're a lot of their quarterback options are slowly dripping away. And so if they really want to change around the franchise, Rodgers is really the guy that they have to go to and get the deal done. So, but looking elsewhere, I know there are other teams in the NFC North other than the Green Bay Packers. Tell me about the Chicago Bears. Are you a little rattled about some of the moves? You've heard so much about, they get the first overall pick, they trade back, they bring in DJ Moore, and a lot of talk about trying to build around Justin Fields and trying to go out and get some offensive linemen as well to protect Justin Fields. I look at some of the moves, and I really like some of the moves the Bears are doing, and I'll be fascinated to see how their draft class turns out. But as a Packers fan on the enemy lines, what do you make of the Bears' moves? Do you think they're a team that you're a little bit nervous about, maybe even?
No.
No, I thought so.
As eye-opening as their moves have been, it seems like they've grabbed a lot of the headlines up until the Aaron Rodgers news, but they've done well. Their offseason, they've gotten the players. They had cap space, so they definitely used it. The DJ Moore trade was a good one. They finally get some help for Justin Fields. Whether Justin Fields is the guy, I don't know. And I say I don't know is because whether I want to believe the reports, I do believe that they considered Bryce Young at some point, or CJ Stroud with that number one overall pick. I'm confident that they did. So for me, because of those question marks, I think I can't be sold on Justin Fields just yet. And I say that because regardless of how his performances were last year, I don't think he makes winning football plays. I know he makes the highlights, but just from the Packers game alone last year, it felt like he contributed to the loss more so than he contributed to how contested the game was. So that's just my opinion on it. And for me, if you don't have the quarterback, then it trickles down moving forward. So kudos to the Bears. They're making headlines for once. And for that, I can commend them on that. As for the other two teams, differing views on the Lions and the Vikings. I think the Vikings are a team that benefited from a division that was subpar than in recent years. I think they benefited. I know I'm going to say using luck. I'm going to use luck in my argument, but they benefited from landing on the right side of luck. You mentioned the Vikings and Bills game, and there's a lot of one-score games. I know people love to harp on, the Vikings, they're such an experienced team. They won all these one-score games, yada, yada, yada. But it also comes to other teams not making the plays, and it just takes one play, similar to that Josh Allen play, where that W turns into an L. So you're going to see definitely a drop in success for the Vikings. And with that, I say the Lions are going to be the team that reaps that benefit, or reaps from those further L's, because I see the Lions being a lot better, being the Lions that finished the year last year, not the Lions that started. And trying to speak as objective as I can, because I still think my Packers with Jordan Love will win this division.
I love it.
But if I were to just look from a lens that's not as a Packers fan, which team has the most momentum heading into the season? Which team has the most fervor about them? I think it is the Lions in this division. I would say the Lions are the team you should have the highest expectations for in the NFC North.
Yeah, I'm also a big Lions guy. Obviously bigger than you in the case of division rivalry, but I think that offense for the Lions could really take a next step here. I know they lose Jamal Williams, but I think David Montgomery is still a solid running back you could rely on, and we'll see what happens with DeAndre Swift, but I look at the receiving options that they have there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams could really take that next step, and we'll see what they do in the draft if they decide to go QB and or if they just decide we're going to go with Jared Goff, because I think Goff gets overhated sometimes. I'm not saying he's an elite quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to change the franchise, lead them to the Super Bowl or anything like that. But I think he's a guy that I think he was under McVay so much. He had that rough rookie season. McVay comes in. He has these great seasons under him. And we hear so much about how McVay wanted to move on from Goff. And then going to the Lions, I don't think he's faltered too far. Obviously not at the same peak as McVay, but still a guy that I think could be a high level to bridge quarterback to a low level starter. And that could be reliable. And especially if you put some weapons around him. And I think their offensive coordinator there, he got a couple of head coaching job interviews. Ben Johnson, I believe his name is. I think he's a guy to keep an eye out for in terms of continuing to build that offense. He seems like a competent offensive coordinator for the Lions. So I think there's a lot to like when it comes to the Lions. And then obviously you got Aiden Hutchinson on the defense there. And I think that defense will get better as well. I'm keeping an eye on that Lions squad. I like what they're coming in with. I think you should get some knee pads there, Mr. Mehran, and so that they don't bite the kneecaps off of you, the way that Dan Campbell leads his team. But yeah, that is the NFC North. Anything else you wanted to add quickly about any other of the teams? You want to tell me more about how great the Packers are and how Jordan Love is the true successor for Aaron Rodgers? Do you have all the confidence in the world, or shall we move on?
The only thing I'll add on, I sensed a little bit of disrespect to our re-signing there of Keyshawn Nixon. That guy changed our return game last year, so he deserves a lot more credit. Re-signing him was huge because our special teams have been bad for years, and especially in the return game. So that's if there's one thing that's going to help Jordan Love, it's field position, and Keyshawn Nixon is one of the biggest components to that.
I love it. Yeah, go after me. It's okay. Go after the take. It's all good. I understand. I can take the heat, especially when it comes to your team. Let's go to the NFC South, and a lot happening in the NFC South. We'll start off with the Falcons. Taylor Heineke, I think everybody's favorite backup quarterback / low-level starter in Taylor Heineke. He signs a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million with the Falcons. Jonnu Smith, finally, the Falcons get the tight end they've been looking for. Jonnu Smith coming into the organization. They also re-sign Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry. And so Jesse Bates, you mentioned earlier, the Bengals lose Jesse Bates, but the Falcons gain Jesse Bates. And so 4-year, $64 million contract for the Atlanta Falcons. And
I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut you off here. This is okay. You know what? This has been a pretty laissez-faire episode right here. But just to say something about the Falcons,
Sure.
There's not a team I want to talk about least than the Falcons, because they don't excite me. They don't do anything for me. They don't move the sticks. No pun intended. But it's just a boring team. They play a boring brand of football. They have nothing that excites me. Their defense isn't inspiring. Their offense is even less inspiring. And I say that as the proud owner of a Kyle Pitts led fantasy team, who one of the better athletes at the tight end position, and you can't make him a focal point of that offense. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to see this team doing anything substantial. I could be wrong. I love the city of Atlanta. I'd love to visit it one day. So I don't know if this will have any echoes heard in the Georgia area, but this team I'm sure there's a lot of other Atlanta Falcons fans that agree with me that this team just doesn't excite me. It's similar to the Atlanta Thrashers. To be honest, that team left town. Not many folks in Atlanta cared about them.
Yeah,
there's no reason for people in Atlanta to care about this team.
Yeah.
So If you can name me something to look forward to, give me a reason for this team to be a component in this NFL season. You let me know, because I can't find one area where they can make some noise.
I love it. Bringing the heat. You cut me off. You're like, no, I got a lot to say about the Falcons. I wasn't expecting that. That's awesome. That's great. I love it. Bring more of the takes. That's what I know. That's the guy I know. That's the guy I've known for years. The guy bringing the.
It takes you some time to get comfortable, you know.
Hey,
it takes you some time to get comfortable.
I understand. Hey, it takes a while, but I knew I was trying to find the one thing to get you fired up, to get you going. And I didn't think it'd be the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not gonna lie. I thought maybe the Cowboys. I thought it would maybe be trying to insult the Packers, but the Falcons. Hey, we found the nerve spot, and let me tell you, I agree with you on the case of Kyle Pitts. What is this team doing? Not utilizing Kyle Pitts at all. I just I question Arthur Smith on that, and you're right. It's a very uninspiring team, and I think they gotta really take a look at themselves. We talk about short rebuilds. Feels like the longest rebuild ever when it comes to the Falcons. I don't think they're going to be that competitive in this division. I know it was a really, really weak division last year, but I just don't. There's really nothing much on this Falcons squad to really get me excited, unless they decide that they realize, oh yeah, we got Kyle Pitts on our team. Let's try and use him and get some plays out of him. But nonetheless, moving on to the Panthers. The Panthers, they're also a kind of a team more that we're looking to see who they draft. They obviously trade up. They get rid of DJ Moore. They trade up to get the first overall pick. We talked about, will they get Bryce Young? Will they get CJ Stroud? There is a video circulating around of Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach, talking about how much he loves CJ Stroud and going over his film. So to me, and hearing the rumblings, I think they're going to go with Stroud at first overall, but who knows? Maybe Bryce Young, he lights it up at his pro day at Alabama and they decide to change course. But if you're to ask me right now, I think CJ Stroud is the next quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. But they do get a quarterback in free agency, Andy Dalton. A guy who's now just kind of in the journeyman phase of his career. Starter for a long time with the Bengals, and then obviously he's kind of been bouncing back and forth with the Cowboys and the Saints as a backup. And I think as a dependable, reliable backup, you can certainly throw him in for a couple of games, and I think he can win you a couple of games short term. But
are we looking at the successor to Ryan Fitzpatrick right here? Is Andy Dalton that guy?
I won't say. Are
there any other candidates for that?
I won't say he's.
Are there any candidates, not in terms of talent, but in terms of just that label? You know, the journeyman quarterback. Or, funny enough, Josh McCown's the OC. Is he the modern day? Is he the successor to a Josh McCown who's going to end up playing for every franchise in this league?
I think McCown certainly has to be in there. Yeah, I think McCown is certainly in there. I think a team that has a quarterback that has the potential. I'm going to skip over a team to talk about him. But I think a quarterback that has potential to be a Ryan Fitzpatrick is Baker Mayfield. Bouncing around different teams to be a starting quarterback. And this looks like for now he is the successor to Tom Brady. It's going to be either he or Kyle Trask. And it sounds like that's going to be the QB battle in Tampa Bay. And also in the case of the Buccaneers, they bring back Levante David on a 1-year deal. They sign Chase Edmonds on a 1-year deal. And the Saints... Obviously, Derek Carr, that's kind of the big name value signing. It seemed like they were going to try and trade him. Instead, they get him through free agency. I think that's a good thing for the Saints. They didn't have to give up anything to get Derek Carr. So he's now the starter for the Saints. They still keep around Jameis Winston. Michael Thomas, I thought he would be a cut. And they're going to keep him for a 1-year, $10 million deal. And there's 2 non-void years because the Saints are in cap hell right now, and they're going to do everything possible to try and field a competitive team. But I look at that. Juwan Johnson as well, signed to a 2-year deal. And so a lot of moves happening in the NFC South. We've heard your thoughts on the Falcons. We know that you are not inspired by this Atlanta Falcons squad. Is there a team in this division that does inspire you? Because this is a division last year that was just weak. Let's just say it how it is. It was a weak division.
Yeah, I think you have to start with the Saints, because that's where the highlight of this division came from, and that's with Derek Carr coming to the Saints for the 4 years. Now, you look at that offense now, and you can make the argument if they can come together. That comes with Michael Thomas being on the field. This has all the makings to be the best offense in football. if you want to just look at face value, you got Michael Thomas, Chris Olave as your two top receivers. Your running backs are Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, and you've got Derek Carr. Listen, you've got in my opinion, two number one receivers. In my opinion, arguably two number one running backs. So what's not to love about that offense? Now, we've known for years, by years, it's been a couple, that the offense and the quarterback position is what's been holding this team back. The defense has been there. It's been sticking around. It's the offense that's been holding them back. Well, the offense is not an excuse on paper anymore. So this team has separated itself, for me, as the favorite in the division. And in a conference where, honestly, there's not much separation, I'd say, between the top dogs and everybody else. As some may think, I believe that whatever you might think, whether if you think it's Cowboys, Eagles, 49ers at the top, will be objective. I don't think there's much separation from everybody else. So I think the Saints are one of those dark horses that you can see, for me, come January, you'll see their name being spoken about as a team that could represent the NFC.
I like it. Yeah, I do like the moves that the Saints have made. I think Carr kind of got dealt a bad. I know he had Devontae Adams in his final season with the Raiders, and it's just like I think this was needed for him, a new change of scenery, and being able to, as you mentioned, I'm a big Chris Olave guy. I really like Chris Olave. When you mentioned two wide receiver ones, I think he, at this stage, like, if they were to have cut Michael Thomas, they would have been just fine with Olave at wide receiver one. To me, he was going to be the offensive rookie of the year had it not been for that period where he was out with a concussion. He was that good for me. And so they have it on offense. Their defense is pretty solid as well. I could see them make some strides. And you know what? Like, I just look at it depth-wise, and Jameis Winston is always a guy that's hit or miss. We've seen that with him last couple of years, 30 for 30, not the documentary, but rather his 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions season. But I think he's a guy you could still put out there, and you could still, with the right system around him, win some football games with. You just can't make him really a long-term starter in this league. So yeah, I just look at the depth of the Saints. I think there's a lot to like here. Buccaneers, I think, are going to take a big step back this year. I know they made the playoffs this year, and they bring back Levante David, but I think their coaching situation is just like, I think coaching is really going to hamper them this season, and I think the quarterback play they're going to get, I know that Baker will come in and he'll still have his Mike Evans, he'll still have his Chris Godwins and whatever, but I don't know, I just got a feeling like, you know, when you just see a team and it's like, you just get a feeling that they're going to take a step back, and you can't really put your finger why, because there's not many changes negatively or positively, but I just look at this Buccaneers squad and I don't see enough that can really entice me to really get behind this squad. And then in the case of the Panthers, we saw a late surge with Steve Wilkes at head coach. I thought maybe he had won himself a head coaching job because of it. Instead, they go with Frank Reich. And so obviously they bring him in to kind of help mentor whichever rookie quarterback they're going to bring in. I think it's going to be CJ Stroud. But nonetheless, I think there's a team here. It's weird because they get rid of a bunch of guys. DJ Moore's gone. Christian McCaffrey was gone last season. And then Baker was gone as well. In the case of Baker and McCaffrey, they get rid of those guys, and all of a sudden they just seem to click all of a sudden, and the Panthers start to win out. They at least compete close to the end in terms of competing for a playoff spot. So I wonder if there is a team there that could do some stuff. I should mention as well, Miles Sanders coming in as the running back as well for the Panthers, signing a deal. So they're a weird team for me. I guess it just depends on who they draft, and if they decide, you know, I know it's the first overall pick, but do they go with Dalton for the first couple of games to get Stroud acclimated with the system and then get Stroud midway through the season? Kind of similar to what happened with Kenny Pickett last year with the Steelers. They have Trubisky start, have him go for a couple of games, and then Pickett comes in. Then he slowly learns the offense. I'm fascinated to see how they do on that front. Any other thoughts on the NFC South?
No, I think you hit it on nail in the coffin with the Bucs. I think there's so much change going on. I think that's a team that, I know they didn't have a great record last year, but they have the potential to take another step back. And when it comes to the Panthers, people fell in love with the way they finished last year. I think if there's ever a coach to help them with a 1-year turnaround, I think it's Frank Reich, a guy. I know he didn't have the most lavish of departures from the Colts, or the most ceremonial, but this is a guy who had a different starting quarterback every year that he was with the Colts. And I know they weren't Super Bowl contenders any of the years, but they won football games. They apart from this passing, they won a lot of football games. So this is a guy that has a track record that he can make do with whatever he's given. And with a defensive coordinator, again, the guy from Denver, Avero, I apologize, a guy that knows what he's doing, and he excels at what he's doing. So he can make do with what they've got on defense, with some studs on that defense, Brian Burns being one of them. This is a team that will put, I say the Saints are going to be the top dog. I see the Carolina pushing them throughout the season, and it'll be a team that we'll look on that could push for a wild card spot. I have the Saints winning this division, Panthers pushing for a wild card spot. I'm not going to commit to if they'll make the playoffs just yet, though.
Not yet. Well, there's still plenty of time. We'll see how they draft. We'll see what they do, but I like it. And we're going to go to the final division here, the NFC West. We'll start off with the Arizona Cardinals, and it just seems tumultuous right now if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan. You have the uncertainty around Kyler Murray, when he's going to come back during the season due to his torn ACL. You have the questions surrounding, is DeAndre Hopkins going to get traded? And so right now, you get rid of your head coach and your GM. It just seems like right now you just try to find a way to kind of field a team and try and keep some positive momentum. They signed Corey Clement, whatever that really means for this squad, who knows. Matt Prater re-signs on a 2-year deal, so they got the kicking solved. Nothing too much in terms of big-time deals for the Cardinals on that front. The LA Rams, very quiet other than trading away Jalen Ramsey. They're going through a lot of cap trouble right now, and their future is looking a little bit bleak. And so I think right now they're trying to get as much assets as they can and try and recoup some of the draft picks. You know, for years we've heard the screw them draft picks mentality. We're going to go all in and win now. And now it seems like it's starting to finally kind of bite them in the ass a little bit. You have Bobby Wagner's going to be gone. They already got rid of Jalen Ramsey. They're just kind of blowing up the team. It sounds like we'll see that they're going to keep a core group of guys. Maybe Matthew Stafford, we'll see. They said he's a guy that's a core, that's a report, but who knows? Maybe he's a guy that's a little bit on edge. Obviously, Aaron Donald, you want to keep him around as long as you can. Just maybe one of the most dominant defensive players to ever play the game. And Cooper Kupp as well, you want to keep around as another core player. But right now, it just seems like trying to regroup, regather, try and get as much assets as you can and solve your cap situation. In the case of the Niners, they signed Sam Darnold to a deal, and a situation for the Niners in terms of their quarterback, Jimmy G, now is gone. They don't have to worry about will he or won't he. He's gone. And you have the situation with Trey Lance. Brock Purdy really came to his own as Mr. Irrelevant, but now he's got that surgery. How is he going to be afterwards? And so they try and get some insurance in Sam Darnold a little bit, maybe a reclamation project. I know it kind of seems like we've been saying that about Darnold for a while now, but he's in an offense in Kyle Shanahan that could potentially, he can maybe find a way to turn it around and at least be competent. And then other moves as well. I really like the Javon Hargrave deal to bring him in, and Cleveland Farrell, former Raider, coming in as well. And so a couple of deals for the 49ers. And in the case of the Seahawks, a surprising season, considering I think a lot of folks had the Seahawks coming in as a weak team. And to be able to make the playoffs the way they did and at least compete, I think they have to look at it as an overall success. And Geno Smith, I don't think a lot of people were really expecting him to turn around the way he did and become a Pro Bowler nonetheless. And so he gets rewarded with a 3-year, $75 million deal, has a max value of $105 million, so good for him. Drew Lock's still there, 1 year, $4 million contract. I think we could put to bed the can Drew Lock be a starter in the NFL talk for quite a while. And so just kind of looking at some of the other deals, Evan Brown coming in on a deal. There's some talk that maybe the Seahawks, where they're positioning, if maybe they decide to go get a quarterback just in case maybe an Anthony Richardson falls or Will Levis falls to them. That's something to kind of keep an eye on as well. But kind of looking at this division, a couple of years ago, this was kind of the stud division, even with the Cardinals being a little bit iffy. You had the Rams, you had the Niners, and Seahawks with Russell Wilson. Now it's like it's not as much of a stud division. I think it's the 49ers division for the taking still.
Yeah. I'm trying to make an argument for any of these teams here that can really push the Niners. I think the Cardinals, I'm not inspired by Jonathan Gannon as the Eagles were in trying to keep him, but I think he's got a lot on his plate. I think this is a team that's just got turmoil after turmoil, starting at the most important position. And this has all the makings of a team that I anticipate will be fighting for the number one overall pick next. When it comes to the Rams, you just really don't know what to make of them just because of how everything fell apart last season. Sean McVay flirting with leaving. Aaron Donald's still there, but are we really sure he's committed to playing football? So that's a team that you still have your foundation there, but is the psyche there for them to succeed? That I don't know. When it comes to the Seahawks, they exceeded expectations. They overachieved last season. I think everyone can agree on that. This is a team that competes. I think nobody can say otherwise. This is a team that is in every football game. It's a Pete Carroll team, so they're gonna fight hard. It's just in terms of seeing their young players grow. Can they take the next step where they can be considered a threat to the Niners in this division? And can they be considered a threat in the conference? That is going to be dependent on how the guys they've drafted develop and the guys they draft this year develop. And when it comes to the Niners, I think they're head and shoulders above everyone in this division. I'm not going to say they're going to blow everybody out, but they're the team that at the end of the day is the best team from top to bottom. The quarterback position is a question mark, as it has been throughout Kyle Shanahan's tenure there, but they're still going to have a top-end defense. It's reinforced. They're still going to have weapons on offense. Losing Mike McGlinchey, if I said his name right, is a tough loss, but I'm sure the Niners will figure it out. It always seems like the Niners have offensive linemen. Yep. It seems like Kyle Shanahan always has a unit there that is more than serviceable, so I'm not worried there. The running backs will perform, and we'll see if how far they can go. This is comfortably one of the contenders in the NFC, and I expect to see them in January. Whether I expect to see them in February, I'm not too sure.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. And it's this is just a division that a couple of years ago it would excite me, but now to me it's 49ers. I do like the Seahawks in terms of, like, as you mentioned, they are an overachieving team last year, and I think they got a solid defense there, and they still have some weapons on offense. You got a DK Metcalf and however much left you can get out of Tyler Lockett. But they've got some good pieces there to kind of continue to make themselves better. And so before we wrap things up, I'm going to pose the question to you, what you posed to me earlier. It's this way too early prediction. I'm going to ask which two teams will be in the NFC Championship game and who's winning the NFC Championship game.
Perfect. Now, I have to preface.
Okay.
Do you want me to speak from the heart or do you want me to speak from the head? Because those are two different approaches I can take right now.
Let's hear both of them. I'm interested to hear what the heart and what the head is telling you.
Okay. Well, the heart says best case scenario, the Packers don't skip a beat. The defense, they figure it out with Joe Barry and company, and the we did get a new DB coach, so maybe that will shore up how loosely we play off coverage, and we figure all that out. The offense is better than ever with impending acquisitions, yada, yada, yada. The Packers represent the NFC. Now, when it comes to my head, like I said, there's not much separation from the top guys and everybody else. I see heading into this season, I can honestly probably pick the playoff teams right now if we're talking. I see Eagles, Cowboys, Giants. I see Saints. I see Niners, and that leaves you with two other ones. Mm-hmm. And whoever the NFC North representative is, I could say the Packers. I'll say the Packers and the Lions are the two teams out of the North. Now, with that said, I think the NFC, I think the Niners, top to bottom, I think they're a well-oiled machine. I think we'll see them in the NFC Championship game with a healthy quarterback at the position, whether it's Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy. I think we do see, or even Trey Lance. I think that's who we're going to see, somebody that's ready to go come January, end of January. Mm-hmm. And see, I'm with my head is that's the tough part, because for me, I know how capable the Packers can be. So I'm going to try and be objective and not include them in this because of so many question marks.
Yep. So
I'm going to say the team I've been bigging up already. I think the Saints, I think they've got their quarterback. I think this is a team that finally there's no excuses. Dennis Allen is a respected coach that always gets his defenses prepared. And I think it's on Pete Carmichael, who's been heralded as a head coach candidate. I think it's on him to finally help put Derek Carr together. I think the Saints will meet the Niners in the NFC Championship game. I think the game could end up in New Orleans because of how that division is shaping up to be in the NFC South. I'll say the game is in San Francisco, and I think it's hard for me to say in year one that Derek Carr and company can overcome the Niners. I'd say that the Niners get back to the Super Bowl.
I like it. I like that prediction. I knew you were going to say Packers with your heart, but with your head.
It was so hard not to use my head and say the Packers as well. Like I've got a big cranium, and I think there's somewhere in there that believes that the Packers can somehow get there. And I'm gonna keep that prediction to myself. But just because I was so objective.
Yes.
With the AFC prediction, I'm going to try to be the same with the NFC prediction there.
I'm in the same ballpark as you. I really want to be objective. I agree with you on the Niners in the NFC Championship, but I think they will win the game. So much wants to tell me the Dallas Cowboys will be there. So, like, I look at the defense, I think the defense could carry this team far. I really do. The questions on offense is just a little bit too much for me. And I find the NFC a little bit more wide open when it comes to who could make it to the NFC Championship game. I could totally see Dallas, and I'm trying to be objective as well. I could see Philly again going in there. Man, it's tough. I liked your Saints thought. I like the thought of the Saints getting in there and being competitive. I think, I don't think the Packers are that far off. Man, there's a part of me that wants to say the Vikings just to really make you mad, but I just I don't know if the Vikings can take that next step. So I'll definitely say 49ers and they'll win. I think in the NFC Championship game, heart says Dallas Cowboys, that the defense is just strong enough and Dan Quinn can carry them to be able to be a competitive team, and the offense will do just enough to get them through. But there's also a part of me that really likes your Saints explanation, and I can buy into the Saints. I'm going to say the Minnesota Vikings are going to get in there. I think this will be a prove-it year for Kirk Cousins. I think Justin Jefferson will continue to prove he's the top receiver. I think the defense, I know they're taking a little bit of a step back, but I think another year under the belt of Kevin O'Connell, I think they'll be able to, put some stuff around. I think it'll be a dogfight between the Vikings and the Lions to get into the playoffs. And I think Packers will also be in the mix as well for whomever wins the division. I'll say Vikings win the division. I'll say Packers will get in on a wild card. And I think the Vikings will go the NFC Championship game and lose to the 49ers. Not to try and make you mad or anything like that. I'm getting tantalized by the talent on the page and the roster, and I think there are certain scenarios, and I like the coaches that they have there, and because honestly, man, I really do think the Cowboys have a chance, and I know I talk myself into it every year, and I inevitably get blown up. It blows up in my face, and they can never get past the divisional round. But how about this? We can both agree to this. If there's ever a chance for the Cowboys to make the NFC champion, not the Super Bowl, the NFC Championship game, this year is definitely a year that it could happen. I think they're one of the stronger teams of the NFC. I think we can both agree with that.
Well, yeah, you don't have the voodoo of the Packers hovering over you, so that's
right.
one thing you don't have to worry about.
Not anymore.
And listen, if you don't have to see the 49ers until the NFC Championship game, then you don't really have any excuses, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I think I was so happy that they beat Tom Brady. I could just say, you know what? That's our Super Bowl. We beat Tom Brady and forced him to retire, never come back. I don't want to hear about Miami or anything like that. He's done. Get him out of there.
If there's one thing though, we're gonna circle back to that Vikings pick because I didn't put the Vikings in the playoffs.
No.
I know this is the way early prediction. So let's see if we keep hold of our Vikings predictions. Let's see who ends up being right, because we got one that says NFC Championship game. We have one that's not even being considered for the playoffs.
That's right.
So
they are a very hot and cold team. They are a very hot and cold team, the Minnesota Vikings. And let it be known that spot, I think the 49ers are going to be pretty locked in for throughout the season. That other spot, whoever they face, I think is very much wide open. I could see Eagles. I could see the Cowboys. I could see the Packers, even Saints. I could see it. Like, I could see a scenario where it happens. I just, I don't want to say Cowboys because a part of me wants to say it, but I've been burned so many times. I'm not going to get burned again. And again, it's early. Who knows? But yeah, I'm going to say Vikings because I think at their peak, I think they can be an elite team in the NFL. But just like, the Chargers, they're very hot and cold. But they have made the championship game in the past with a lesser quarterback, I argue, who's now the backup for the Texans now, whose name all of a sudden escapes me, but he was the backup as well for the Bills this past season. And so, nonetheless, that's my way too early prediction.
If it means anything, again, I'm providing arguments for the Cowboys. It seems like out of all the big dogs from last year in the NFC, it seems like they're the one whose dominant unit has some continuity. And I say that because the Eagles lost both their coordinators.
Yep.
The Niners have a new defensive coordinator coming in. So, if anything, the Cowboys still have Dan Quinn. They still have that defense. Is that their advantage heading into the season? We'll find out.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, that was quite the extensive look at free agency so far. There's still more.
Oh, we're not done yet. Hold on, we're not done yet. We have our way early Super Bowl prediction.
Oh, you got to hit me with the Super Bowl.
You played moderator for most of this. I picked Jets, Aaron Rodgers. Potential Jets and the 49ers. You picked the Niners and the Chiefs, I think.
I picked the Niners and the Bengals.
The Bengals. You picked the Bengals. Well, good for you. So I'll let you have the floor. Who do you have winning that Super Bowl there?
I got the Niners. I really like the Niners squad. I think
so. You keep that in mind. With that prediction, your way early prediction, you have the Niners surpassing the Cowboys for Super Bowl championships. Okay. Correct. Just want to remind you of that. That's all.
I am well aware, buddy. I've been facing heartbreak. What's an additional heartbreak going to do to me at this point when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys? Niners could surpass us. Fine. I've accepted it at this point. But yes, I am going to pick the Niners to win the Super Bowl. Not happily, but again, very early, very fluid situation. Could be a landmark changing trade or whatever, but I'm picking the Niners over the Bengals to win the Super Bowl.
With that said, speaking with my head.
With your head.
With my head. With my Aaron Rodgers potentially led Jets against the 49ers, I don't see how the Jets don't win that Super Bowl. Because if you look at it, I know Robert Saleh coached under Kyle Shanahan, but if anyone's going to be prepared for that offense, it would be a Robert Saleh-led defense. And then you've got an offense that I expect come January and February to be gunning. And it's hard for me to believe that it doesn't matter who it is, if a Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, or a Sam Darnold-led offense. I know he's lost to Garoppolo a few times, but I don't see how that quarterback for the Niners beats an Aaron Rodgers-led offense with that defense. So I have the Jets winning their first Super Bowl since Joe Namath.
Wow.
I have the Jets being labeled as the team in New York, and I have Aaron Rodgers getting his second Super Bowl and second Super Bowl MVP.
Wow. There you go.
With my head.
With your head.
With my head.
Not because you're the president of the Aaron Rodgers fan club. Oh, no. You're thinking with your head. You're looking at the talent that's there on the Jets, and you're like, Rodgers will help turn it around for this squad. I love it. I can't wait.
And who doesn't love a nice story, you know? He goes to New York, not with the Giants, but the Jets, the team that's like the Mets in baseball. This is the Jets.
Yeah.
Wins them a Super Bowl in year one, and being the most scrutinized player in the past couple of years, sticks it to everybody else. I don't know. I love that story. Speaking of my head,
of course, you've bought yourself into the story. You're buying in. Again, still very early. Many things could change. Hey, maybe the Jets don't even get Aaron Rodgers. They butt fumble it. They screw it up. Who knows? It's the Jets. So we'll see on that. But yeah, no, this is a lot of fun. It was good to record a football podcast again. And thanks again for joining me, Mehran. I really appreciate your time. I always enjoy talking with you, even though your takes, like I get you fired up on some of the takes. I love it. That's why I love it. Really wanted to have you on, and I'm glad you took the time today. There's a lot going on with March Madness starting today, and the Sens are on right now, and so to be able to take this much time with me and talk some football, I really appreciate it, my friend.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and always remember, with my head. With
your head, that's right. That's the slogan for Mehran. Always using his head when it comes to these decisions. But thanks again for coming on, my friend. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to, like, any socials or whatever? Or are you just like free flowing, man? Not right now. Not right now. Maybe one day soon, but not right now. Right now we're in limbo. We're in limbo. All right. Well, hey, if you ever end up promoting something, whether it be a blog or whatever, let me know. I'll make sure to update the episode and make sure to get that link in there. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in to the first episode of Gibby's Football Podcast of the new season. Talking about free agency. We might do another free agency episode depending on any other significant moves that come through. And I'm sure Mehran will have you come back on the program as well during the season, talking some of the football games. We'll see how your Rodgers-led Jets prediction to the Super Bowl plays out during the season. I'm very interested to see how that goes. But got some exciting stuff coming up. We'll continue the free agency talk. Planning to do some draft content as well. I've been watching some film of some of the different players. I've mainly been watching some quarterbacks film right now, and then we'll try and progress out over the wide receivers and some of the defensive players as well. And so hopefully maybe it'll all culminate in this massive mock draft episode. I think would be a lot of fun. Just total mock draft of the first round. That's kind of the big plan right now. So we'll see how things go. But the off season, the NFL, it's always fun, free agency and draft season and training camps after that. And so we'll keep an eye on everything, but stay tuned to the podcast. You can listen on your favorite podcast player, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. This podcast will be there. You can follow us on our social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Zach, ZACH _McGibbon, MCGIBBON. I'll be tweeting out a lot of football takes. You may get the occasional hockey tweet as well. You never know with that account. But you can follow me for some takes there. You can also like on Facebook and follow on Instagram, the Gibby's Football Podcast page, where you can keep up to date on the latest episodes and when the new episode will come out. And keep on tuning into the podcast. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks again, my friend.